Hello. Welcome back to the Space Gulag. Today we're doing What If Earth Was in Star Wars Part 1 of 3. Before we begin this video, special thanks to our patrons, voice actors, and everyone else part of my team. I got special limited edition merch for the Pride of the Empire during our Earth series that will be available until the Earth series ends. Our story begins in the ancient world on a small blue planet in the mid-rim. It was part of the Copernican System. In the desert there was a small kingdom divided by two powers. In the southernmost power there was Heraclopolis, and in the northernmost power there was Thebes. The current divide of the first intermediate period was the transition of powers from a fragile monarchy to the people. The small region had just begun its expansion into empire building. The collection of slaves and the construction of massive structures were in the plans for the coming years. That was until a small vessel crash-landed. Out of the ship came an assortment of individuals. These individuals had much more technology than those from the small globe in the Copernican system. The leader of the group wore armor and robes, and he stood very tall. His name was Master Rego Thif, and he was leading a group of Jedi across the galaxy to escape the Sith Lord who had just conquered the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Rego had a group of Jedi Knights with him, and under him was his personal Padawan, Mioni Skyko. Master Thief felt terrible for his student. She was under extraordinary amount of stress. Everyone was, but Mioni was in the middle of her trials when the Jedi Temple was attacked. Master Thif was leading member on the Jedi High Council, and he was under the understanding that he needed to get as many Jedi out of the temple before it fell. Many Jedi had different locations to go to. Master Satil Shan was directed to go to Alderaan in the core, but he recently lost contact with her and her squad, being under the assumption that Lord Malgus of the Sith invaded Alderaan and burnt the planet to the ground. Master Thif couldn't imagine anything worse happening to Alderaan. It was such a lovely world. Master Thif told his student and the other knights to wait in the vessel while he and his astromech droid T-791 investigated the local area. The Jedi and the few Republic troops that landed on the planet would set up a perimeter on the nearby river until Master Thif returned. The Jedi Master and his astromech found a dirt trail that spun around the sand towards the gates of the towering city. It was by no means a modern city, by Coruscant standards at the very least, but the architecture was incredible. T-791 beeped at her owner, and Master Thif nodded his head. The little droid informed him that she was picking up no signal on the radars. Thif noted that it was oddly peculiar that there wasn't any signals coming from the planet. Most if not a few planets in the mid-rim had a civilized population that was able to travel throughout the galaxy, with representation in Coruscant. Though Master Thif noted that he never heard of the system until they arrived on it. While they walked forwards, they noticed a group of people carrying massive blocks towards the city. Behind them were a couple of men with whips cracking them away whenever someone faltered in line. The Jedi instincts inside of Master Thif kicked in, but he stopped himself, informing 91 that they needed to get inside the city gates and learn about where they were and if they could hold refuge here until they could return to Coruscant. Thif knew that the Sith would likely arrive to the system, especially if they had no issue besieging the planet of Alderaan. Surely the Sith would be here to do the same. Once the slaves disappeared to the city, Master Thif and 91 made their way in front of the city, to which an armed guard came out to greet them. 91 translated everything they said into Galactic Common so that Thif could understand what they were saying to him. Essentially, they were confused as to why someone was wearing material that only upper-class citizens were allowed to wear, when he clearly wasn't an upper-class citizen. Assuming that his slave had risen up and stolen from someone, Thif responded back telling them that he wasn't from the system and that he was here on purpose of peace. The elite guard didn't take too kindly to this, assuming that he was insulting Ra, one of their numerous gods. Master Thif stepped back as the elite guard raised their spears. They were already on edge because of the astromech, having never seen something so high-tech before. Being that Thif was still standing tall, they still perceived him as a threat. Thif ignited his lightsaber, and the guard was left in shock. One of the guardsmen swung for Master Thif, and the Jedi Master stepped aside and cut the spear into pieces before raising his blade into his formed 4 stance. The guardsman panicked and ran away. Thif looked at the droid, shrugging his shoulders, suggesting that this would be more difficult than he would like it to be. The heat of the desert was unbearable, as Thif and 91 made their way into Thebes, getting an assortment of looks from everyone. 91 beeped at Thif, and informed him that the Palace of Power seemed to be directly ahead, based on its structure and its prominence in the city itself. Thif agreed, and the two of them made their way there. They were going to make attempts to make friends with these locals, so that they could defend them in case the Sith came. For the most part, Master Thif believed that they could return to this planet after they defeated the Sith and help it into the future, but that would come later. When they arrived at the palace, an army of men presented themselves forward, ready for a fight. Thif bit his lip. He saw the same guardsmen from the front gate with some governmental officials. Thif ignited his lightsaber once more and told 91 to translate what he said, telling the guardsmen that he wasn't there for war. He was here because this planet was in severe danger. The Egyptians looked around at each other, as a few governmental officials stepped forward, asking what danger. Thif explained as best he could, telling them that he was a Jedi. They were defenders of justice and bringers of peace in the galaxy. The Sith attacked them on Coruscant and destroyed everything. The Jedi had been separated throughout the galaxy, and because of this separation, the Sith had been burning down civilizations to the ground and hunting the Jedi. If the Egyptians didn't allow the Jedi to stay and defend them, then the Sith would do the same thing to them. The Egyptians took in this information and then told Master Thif that if he could provide proof of their struggle, then they would be allowed to stay in Thebes for the time being. They could take up refuge with them. Thif nodded his head and turned on his transmitter, requesting Mioni to bring a handful of troops to their location with some holograms, then asking her to send Commander Nej Vanden and the rest of the Jedi and the Republic troopers around the globe to see if any other civilizations existed. If they did, he wanted them to make contact with them and report their findings. Eventually, Mioni Skyko and the troops would arrive. She saw her master surrounded by guardsmen, but the situation seemed to be under his control. Mioni gave her master the hologram they received from Tython in the destruction of the Jedi on that planet. She also gave him hologram of some of the damage done to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant before they left. The group went inside the main building, and they showed off the details of their feat. The Egyptians were blown away, to say the least. Sure, they figured out a lot with so little technology on their own world, but the technology they were witnessing before their very eyes wasn't even within centuries of being discovered. It was several thousands of years away of being discovered. The Egyptians told the Jedi that the Republic troops were welcome to stay, under one condition, the condition that they be given the technology and shown how to utilize it for productivity. Master Thif didn't see an issue with this. He could feel the fact that the Force was strong here on Earth too. This planet was rich with its connection to the Force, and there was a chance that there would be children of the Force present on the planet as well. Thif also believed that Earth deserved a shot at being a part of the Republic, though it had a lot of modernization it needed to go through. Without said modernization, Earth would never be able to successfully trade intergalactically. Rego noted that the people of Earth would need to unlearn their slaving techniques as it wasn't supported by the government of the Republic, but he believed that to be something that would be discussed in the future. For now, Rego needed to make sure his troops and the Jedi got themselves situated. While they did that, Master Thif and the Thebes officials walked around the town, so that Thif could understand the key locations within the city. Thif was scouting out because if the Sith came and landed remotely near them, then he'd have to evacuate the city to Heracropolis. Across the globe, the Republic troopers would land in the ancient city of Zhengzhou, only to be greeted by the Emperor Tai Kang. The Emperor was much more initially welcoming than the guardsmen in Egypt, as if he'd been expecting them, but the Emperor connected with the Jedi quicker than they realized, because they were interested in the Emperor's brother more than him. The brother was very obviously connected with the Force, but once the Jedi got over the brother's connection to the Force, they realized that the Emperor himself was very deeply connected to the Force as well. For months, the Jedi would begin to integrate themselves on Earth, because they were still unable to leave. During this time, the Jedi were able to connect the Thebes to Zhengzhou and to the rest of the Shai dynasty. Nothing like the Silk Road, but it was essentially a bare-bones ability to communicate with a hologram and a translator so that the Egyptians could communicate with the Chinese. This expanded to several other small civilizations building up across the globe. Master Thif spent time in Thebes and in Zhengzhou with Emperor Kang and his brother, because truthfully both the Emperor and his brother had a very good connection with the Force, and it was enough of a connection to warrant them to be welcomed to the Jedi Order. Master Thif was contacted by Jedi Master Satil Shan. She informed Thif that Alderaan fell, but she believed that she defeated Darth Malgus, informing him that the Sith Lord got into a fight with her and she buried him under a mountain. She believed the Republic was reforming. There was hope for the galaxy, as she asked her fellow Jedi Master for his coordinates so that they could pick him up and his troops. Thif sent out the coordinates and informed her of everything he'd been through in the last couple of months, filling her in about the civilizations of Earth and with how the right technology they could become a very useful ally in the Republic. While Master Shan had no issue with this, she believed that months away from the war made Master Thif forget the importance of the war that sat on their doorstep. The communication ended abruptly. Thif was rather disappointed. He understood that the war was going to change perception of individuals, because that's what war did, but he didn't expect it to be so negative for the Jedi mindset. He was trying to find positivity in anything he could, and he was a little jarred by the behavior of his friend Shan. Regardless, Master Thif informed his people across the planet that they would be leaving soon, so that they could join the war against the Sith. They understood, and they began to mount up all their forces and supplies, except because of the transmission between Shan and Thif, there was something tragic that would happen. The Sith picked up on the signal and dispatched their fleet to the Copernican star system so that they could destroy the Jedi before Master Shan got there. Malgus surely didn't want another rematch with someone as vile as her. For the moment they were going to be at the star system before the Republic, it wouldn't be long before the skies opened up and from the skies rained down pain for the people of Thebes. Master Thif was sent into panic as he mounted up his troops on the rooftops and demanded that they fire at the Sith starfighters. Thif ignited his lightsaber and demanded that Meloni lead the Egyptians to the Nile and get them out of there. She questioned him, but Thif reminded her that the Nile moves south to north. It would get the people away from the civilization, keeping them safe from the possibility of being exposed to the Sith if they tried to move to Heracropolis. It would also allow the Jedi to create a defensive perimeter within the city so that they couldn't hurt individuals that were trying to flee. There weren't a ton of people of the Republic, but they needed to be enough. Because of all the time they spent on Earth, Thith got into contact with multiple civilizations across the planet and informed them to get to their safety locations. It was the best way for them to avoid absolute travesty on this planet. Thith ran through the streets of Thebes, ducking and weaving between people as blaster fire filled the sky and rockets exploded in the streets, wiping out groups of people running away in terror. Thith ran to the gates and looked out. The Sith army had already landed, and the destroyer droids were marching upon the city, blasting away, melting the walls of the ancient city. The Jedi moved to the front and ignited their weapons, deflecting the strikes from the Sith army. Republic troopers made their way to the ramparts and fired down, crushing the attacking army. Commander Von Dun rolled up behind Master Thif and told him that T-791 reported the Sith fleet over the planet. They were here to scale a planet-wide destruction and wipe out the entire population, similar to what they tried to do on Alderaan. Thif had a very noticeable fear in his face as he looked back and blocked a blaster bolt behind his head. He told Von Dun that they better hope the Republic gets here soon, because without them, their cause would be lost. Thif ripped his blade around and stepped forward before his men and the men of the Sith army. Malgus could be seen with a robe above his head behind his army. Thif told the troops to fall back into the city. They would ambush Malgus from a more defendable position. Thif used the Force to raise the city gates as he turned around and ran full speed into the city. Not long after the gates busted open and the Sith troopers poured in, they would be surprised. Before they could get past the gates, they would run over several buried landmines, blowing their ranks into smithereens. Malgus growled as he cut through the wounded with his lightsaber, killing them all, and encouraging the rest of his men to stammer forward, until they crushed the Jedi. The Sith troopers piled into the corridors, blasting away with firepower. When they saw Republic troopers, they started shooting at them. Dozens of Republic troopers fell to the ground, dying out into dust. As the Sith troopers came up, they realized that they killed scarecrows, and before they could adjust their position, they were blasted to the ground by the Republic troopers that were outmatched and outnumbered. Master Thif leapt forward and cut through the Sith assassins. Thif called out through his comlink, asking for his Padawan and asking if she was alright. Meloni came running around the corner, deflecting blaster fire from behind her. Commander Von Dun ducked behind a crate as Thif pulled his Padawan to the side and caught a blade of a Sith Marauder and threw him to the side. Another Marauder swung viciously at Thif. The Jedi Master kicked his leg forward with his metal boot as he shattered the leg of the Marauder. Thif turned around, cutting down one of the Sith before swinging back and slicing through the next. Thif helped Meloni up and directed her and Commander Von Dun to the nearby building. They moved to the roof of the building and got a look of the city. They could see a good portion of the city. It was under fire, but currently the Republic troopers and the Sith troopers were fighting in the streets. The Republic was still holding on. The Jedi and the Sith fought each other, and the sounds of the battle echoed throughout the city corridors. Thif called out to T-791 and asked if the Republic was in orbit. The little droid reported that the Republic fleet had just come out of hyperspace, and they were currently engaging the Sith. Thif knew that Malgus would retreat so that he didn't get trapped. Thif then turned around and saw Malgus walking through the battle, killing Republic troopers and his own men as he made his way back to his shuttle. He was informed that the Republic was here. It wasn't that Malgus was afraid of the Republic, he'd just rather fight the Republic on his own terms, and currently he was in gridlock with the Republic on the ground, and didn't need to risk his fleet being destroyed. Thif jumped across the building as Maloney followed her master. Commander Von Dun looked at them and told 91 that they needed to back up the rest of the men on the ground. Malgus crossed out the Gate of Thieves as fires burned behind him, and the sound of explosions rattled the ground. Thif leapt through the top gate and heard his apprentice behind him as he turned around asking her to stop what she was doing. Before she could rebuttal, a lightsaber flew up at him, and Maloney pushed her master to the side and blocked the thrown blade of Malgus. Of course, Maloney was ready for this. She was almost a Jedi Knight before the temple fell. She jumped down to the ground and looked at Malgus. He was a warrior of the Sith, one of the best they'd ever had up until this point. Malgus pulled his lightsaber back and stepped forward, and Maloney ripped her blade forward, swinging at the Sith Lord. He backpedaled, blocking every strike by her. Thif leapt down to help a student as she swung around and parried every strike made by Malgus. He looked over and backhanded her, throwing her to the ground as Master Thif rolled up with his elbow, throwing it into Malgus's mask, jarring the breathing apparatus loose and swinging at him ferociously. Malgus's mask began to scream as air fled the pipes. Malgus held his hand out, blocking strikes while he tried to piece it back together. Thif got more and more aggressive, less of the Jedi way, more of the Sith, pushing back the Sith warrior. Malgus tumbled to the ground. The Jedi Council member held his blade forward before he heard the ignition of several more lightsabers. The Sith assassins and marauders were here. Thif turned around and saw Maloney facing them. Malgus grinned under the mask as he turned around and stood up, walking back towards his personal shuttle and retreating into space and departing from the Copernican System. Maloney and Thif stood their ground just as the Sith ran at them. Sadly, Malgus escaped, but they needed to fight their way out of this. The fighting inside the city died down, and silence filled the air. The desert could only hear the burning of lightsabers as they collided in the fury of the desert sands. Thif and Maloney bounced off of each other, using their lightsaber bond as master and apprentice to beat back the Sith. Commander Von Dun heard the commotion and ordered his men forward to assist the Jedi. They cleared up the city and it was obvious their Jedi generals needed them. The two Jedi worked hard, swinging and parrying, using the best of their strength together. The two of them were able to cut down several Sith before Thif was jabbed in the back by an assassin. Thif coughed up and tumbled to the ground, looking at his apprentice. He realized what had just happened, tossing his lightsaber to his student. She had shock on her face, watching as another Sith swung his blade down on Thif's neck, decapitating the Jedi Master. Maloney watched. A tear escaped her eye, and she caught the lightsaber, igniting her master's weapon and leaping forward, cutting down the two Sith, killing them nearly immediately. She was quick on her feet, kicking another Sith in the mask before cutting through his robes, killing him. Maloney saw out of the corner of her eyes the Republic troops arriving to assist them, and before she could make any real impact against the remaining Sith, she turned around and looked at the hand of a Sith marauder sitting just before her chest. She looked down and choked, dropping her master and her lightsaber. The Sith marauder's soulless mask grabbed her by the throat and twisted her neck, killing her instantly. Commander Von Dun cried out as he ran forward, blasting his pistols. The other Republic troopers followed him as they moved in to defend their Jedi generals. The few remaining Jedi Knights ran into action to fight off the last of the Sith. The marauders and the assassins were very easily outnumbered, and they were shot down, as if they were seated in front of a firing line. Commander Von Dun got to the two Jedi and realized they were both dead. T-791 sat at the gates of Thebes and whimpered, being able to see the decapitated head of her master lay flat on the ground, without a body next to it. T-791 knew what happened, and she had no one to take care of her now. Von Dun looked over to one of his men and told them to inform Master Shan of their coordinates. At the same time, he ordered another one of the men to get in contact with Emperor Tai Kang. His brother would be coming with them to train with the Jedi. The Republic needed it. Within an hour, the Sith fleet would have fled from Earth into the galaxy, and when Master Shan arrived, she was very saddened to hear of her friend's death. Another issue would be revealed to the Republic. Emperor Tai Kang was apparently dead of a drowning incident, and now was succeeded by his brother, meaning that the brother would not be joining them. Commander Von Dun would inform the people of Thebes that they may not return, and gave them a frequency to contact the Jedi once the war was over. The Republic would leave the ravaged city of Thebes for the Egyptians to clean up. A slight resentment would come from it, but they would also be eternally grateful to Master Thif, who gave his life in servitude to them. They would construct an obelisk in honor, attributed to their Jedi general. Earth would remain silent for decades. While the Jedi and Sith continued their war, eventually the Republic would reach out to them. Being that the planet was so young, with such a young civilization, the Republic believed that it would be their best interest to help include the Copernican System into the Republic, being that the people of Earth had the opportunity to serve the Republic in a positive way. Once the war with the Sith was complete, for the time being, the Republic would firstly invest in the reconstruction of Coruscant, but they would fund resources out to off-worlds affected by the war. Being that Earth was affected by the war, the planet received its first statement of galactic realm. The Republic went in with contractors, translators, and the entire business market of the galaxy, saw Earth as a profit machine, untapped with the potential to be turned into the Alderaan of the Mid-Rim. They saw it not only as a tourist destination, but as a planet with the raw potential to become a political powerhouse in the Mid-Rim. While politicians saw Earth as a great planet to build on and create renewable infrastructure on, the ability to profit off of the few other worlds in the Copernican System was a big interest to many. For example, the Copernican System had 4 gas giants. Because these planets were all a part of the Copernican System, they belonged to the population of Earth. Businesses would go in, create deals with the people of Earth to profit off of these gas giants, and then they would build multiple Tabana gas refineries on Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, and Jupiter. The Republic saw the Copernican System as a cash cow ready to burst. Mining operators would start to push mining operations on Saturn's rings, the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, Mars, the Kuiper belt, and several moons in the Copernican System. On top of that, industrial facilities would be placed on the 2 closest planets to the Copernican System's sun, on Mercury and Venus. It wouldn't take long for the very remote civilizations of Earth to be built into an empire united. Instead of years of fighting, global domination, and years of rivalries that would fade into non-existence, the population of Earth would find a common goal to shoot for. They sought for the stars, and in the meantime, with technological advancements, tens of thousands of years in the future of what they had, they began to search the planet and discovered everything they could find. On the surface, they built massive cities, and the Council of Earth found unison in the Mediterranean and from the Yellow River. The cities that emerged resembled the architecture of Coruscant, yet had the elegance and beauty of those forged on Alderaan. The era of the Old Republic would be capped off with the beginning of the High Republic, an era of which Earth would become the foothold in the Mid-Rim. Leading several systems across the Republic, the people of Earth offered up both some of the galaxy's best politicians and some of the Jedi Order's members. The Copernican System was a cash cow and had no sight of hindering, because the entire system consistently produced galactic credits. After the contract signed and the Old Republic died out with the old businesses, the people on Earth forged new facilities that operated at a faster pace with better AI and more functional operators that worked for only Earth. Their credits jumped up exponentially. During the High Republic, the Copernican System became the site of gold rush for new businesses. With the Copernican System taking its high stand in the galaxy, and with the High Republic looking like it couldn't get any better, the future looked extraordinary for the small blue globe in the galaxy far, far away. Our story continues in the Copernican System. Since the age of the Old Republic, the people of Earth took advantage of the resources present in their star system. They made several contracts with businesses within the Republic. After 1,000 years of growth, the contracts ended, and the people of the Copernican System moved in and replaced all the facets of industry. The Tabana gas refineries on Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, and Jupiter would be replaced with higher functioning refineries. On the other hand, the mining operations across the multitude of planets and asteroid belts from Earth to the Kuiper belt would be replaced as well. As Earth's tech caught up with the rest of the galaxy, their own starships would be their own means of transport from Earth to all these industrial locations. Of course, the other energy industrial facilities on Mercury and Venus would provide renewable power for Earth. The planet itself saw much change. Since the first intermediate period in Egypt and the Shi'ite dynasty in China, Earth transformed into an advanced society. While in Egypt they hadn't begun the period of pyramid building, they never truly would. Truthfully, once the Republic returned, Earth's major civilizations would converge in one major area. Eurasia would become the site of the largest sectors of human population. The Mediterranean, the Nile River, and the Yellow River would host an array of massive cities. Skyscrapers would tower into the skies, and architecture would resemble the elegance and beauty of Coruscant, while maintaining the luscious, natural beauty of Alderaan. Earth's people, ever since the invasion of the Sith, were in tight unison. Well, rather they came together because of the Jedi when they first arrived, because the humans had no real reason to challenge each other, and they found their communications with other civilizations to be useful for themselves, and so they united. Truthfully, the people of Earth had no long-standing competitions. There were instances of decay between neighboring civilizations, but once the Jedi arrived and left Thebes in shambles, the people of Earth decided to unite in case the Jedi or the Sith returned. When the Republic did eventually come back, the people of Earth were skeptical. But with the Council of Thebes, as it was referred to at the time, united, they decided to make an accord with the Republic. The Council of Thebes became known as the Council of Earth. Sprawling cities emerged from the Italian peninsula to Yemen, Romania, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, down the Nile to Heracleopolis, and at course, the massive capital city of Earth in Zhenzhou. The common theme between all these cities was their location near a body of water, whether it be the Nile, Mediterranean, Arabian Sea, Caspian Sea, Black Sea, or of course the Yellow River. Senators from Earth were a bit of a unique bunch, always a cast of diverse faces, but they all shared the common interest of love for planet Earth. The technology of Earth developed into remarkable stuff, and it would only be a matter of time until the people of the Copernican System set themselves up for longevity in the galaxy. Above Earth was a large structure, and they would also build next to it the first space station with battle platforms. Being that the Copernican System was in the mid-rim, they were susceptible to attacks from pirates, especially since Earth began donning the name of Alderaan of the mid-rim. Earth had an established militia fleet because of the value the Copernican System annually created. Earth had a large trading deal with the Republic, and because of all the natural resources in the Copernican System, the people of Earth thrived off the credits, and used all of their earnings on better living for the people of the planet, and better facilities across the system. As for the governing of Earth, it was rather democratic, surprisingly. Considering the mix of governing bodies at the time the Jedi landed, the people of Earth had little issues reforming from the feudal system and removing monarchs from power. Being that the emperors of the Shi'ite dynasty were ousted, after people noted the functionality of the Egyptians in the first intermediate period without pharaohs or monarchs. It was a dark time for Earth, because they existed in a realm of communication, but outside that communication, they had little contact with each other. They couldn't access each other. Their religious situation was also extremely different. The Egyptians and the Chinese were polytheistic. The people of Earth kept these similar values, but once the Jedi came to Earth, for the children of the Force, the people of Earth split into two separate religions. The first religion was the people of the Force. Generally, this religion existed in the Mediterranean and the Nile River area, while the other religion, being simply a polytheistic culmination of cultures, would simply exist in the Black Sea, Arabian Sea, and Yellow River area. As Earth pushed forward into the future, they would see the galaxy outside them greatly change. While the Egyptians rid themselves of the slaves they had during the first intermediate period, it was obvious others in the galaxy still harbored slaves. The people of the Copernican System didn't falter into barbaric habits or societal traits. While the Eurasian continent was filled with populous cities, there were groups of civilizations in the Americas. The people of the Karo Super in Peru were the only large, formidable group of civilized humans that the Jedi interacted with in the Old Republic. Truthfully, there were thousands of isolated tribes throughout the Americas, and the people of Earth discovered them, but they let them be. There was no real reason to impede on their territory, and they allowed them to function in their own right. Many believed that these tribes were worshippers of the Force, but no one really knew. They were greatly respected among the Council of Earth, but they too were mystified by them as well. The Council of Earth had a very distinguished close ally in the core. While they were very much so a part of the Greater Republic, they had trading partners they got along with better than the others. A couple notable partners were Kuat, Corellia, Alderaan, Anaxes, Cato Nemodia, Ringo Vinda, and Mon Calamari. The best part about being allies with all these systems was their advancements in space-related tech. Because the people of the Copernican System were late bloomers in the galaxy, their interest was in space expansion. With the amount of credits the Copernican System made, they consistently paid out heavy amounts of credits for the best supplies around the galaxy. Their relationship with Kuat and Mon Calamari was incredibly important for their star tech. The High Republic was a period of extreme growth in the Copernican System. The people of Earth were able to completely explore their entire planet and have a complete understanding of every species on their planet. There hadn't been a significant war, let alone battle, since the Sith invaded during the Old Republic. Earth was thriving, and because of it being an economical powerhouse in the galaxy, it had a lot of leverage on Coruscant. The Council of Earth was very influential, and this even continued out of the High Republic era into the Age of the Galactic Republic. That Age of the Galactic Republic would be filled with tensions, and once the Trade Federation began its blockade of Naboo, the Council of Earth was outraged. Naboo wasn't necessarily close to Earth in terms of relations, but it was a mid-rim system, and that meant the threat was real enough to be talked about on Earth. The people of Earth would come to the conclusion, believing that the Trade Federation would definitely do it again. While the Council of Earth had good relations with Cato Nemodia during the High Republic, the people of Earth saw an issue with the Trade Federation openly blockading the planet of Naboo. The people of Earth's closeness with the space tech-heavy star systems would begin the work on the construction of their own space stations. While the Copernican system had multiple space stations littered across the system, like an engine factory over Mars and a battle platform over Earth, the Council decided that they would work more towards more defense platforms around Earth, specifically, and on top of that, an automated defense fleet, using technology that they had from the Trade Federation. During the High Republic, the Council of Earth worked closely with the Trade Federation, meaning Earth had its own Lucrehulks, centuries old, but still Lucrehulks. Earth had its own notable cruisers and intergalactic vessels, though most of them were luxury vehicles. Some were yachts that were bought by the uber-rich on planets like Canto Bight. Other vessels were ships that senators of the Galactic Republic used, different versions of upper-class corvettes, nothing too large but specific to Earth. With the recent issue on Naboo, the newest shipyard would be constructed around Earth's moon. Truthfully, the people of Earth had landed on the moon and could have colonized it, but decided against it. Now they would use the moon as a secret base for defending the planet of Earth. An entire fleet of AI starfighters would be built and placed there. As for the shipyard, it would lay outside of Earth's orbit, but heavily protected by a couple new battle platforms. Other planets in the Republic called these Golan platforms, though the people of Earth built their own model, inspired heavily by the Golan platform, but with a lot more firepower. The shipyards constructed around Earth would have the best manufacturers inside of the Mid-Rim, and they would begin to construct ships for other planets in the Mid-Rim. Basically, anyone who ordered something and couldn't afford the price of the Kuat drive yards Ringo Vinda or Mon Calamari. This added to the amount of galactic credits that the Copernican system drew in. Because of this success, the Council of Earth would construct another grouping of shipyards just beyond the asteroid belt next to Mars and build it around Jupiter. The success of the construction of these yards would be remarkable. For the next 10 years, everything would go brilliantly. The expansion of the Copernican shipyards would complete justly with the Kuat drive yards, and then war would break out. Earth, being loyal to the Republic, would side with the Republic war effort, defining their lines across the Mid-Rim as the only Republic-allied planet in a bunch of Separatist-aligned worlds. Not that there weren't Republic planets in the Mid-Rim, but they were surrounded by purely Separatist worlds. This, of course, was a very bad spot to be. But with support from Chancellor Palpatine, the people of Earth saw it to be a functional strategy. On top of that, the Chancellor was allowed to create a military thanks to the fill-in senator of Naboo, Jar Jar Binks, who voted on behalf of the Chancellor. Palpatine would dispatch an admiral to the Copernican system to deliver a set of blueprints for the new fighting force of the Republic, the Venator-class Star Destroyer. The order would be massive, and it would require every single shipyard bay to be open. In exchange, the Council of Earth requested that Earth be given a defense fleet to protect themselves, to which they were granted. Palpatine also decided that he would task the Copernican system with the first super-class dreadnought, titled the Pride of the Core. It would be the best-kept secret here. While Dooku and the Separatists knew that the Copernican system was a strong foothold on the Mid-Rim, they would never assume a project of such magnitude to be created here. Also, being that the Copernican system was such a foothold, there was a bit of tension with the idea of actually invading the system, because it could cost them extra losses. Of course, with Palpatine controlling both sides of the war, he could avoid it, but sometimes Separatist generals got too excited with their own plans, especially someone as rambunctious as General Grievous. The Copernican system would get to work immediately on the growth of its Venator fleet, so that the Republic could have all these vessels it needed when the time came for battle. Inside the capital of Zhenzhou, people would construct a living district for the clone troopers, so that they could be moved from Kamino to Earth and be ready when the ships were finished on the shipyards. These facilities in Zhenzhou would be some of the best facilities in the entire Republic for clone troopers. It wasn't isolated from the rest of the capital city, but it would be very identifiably different and in their own location. For the clones, when they arrived, they'd have living quarters, their own academy for training, a simulation room where they could operate a Venator in real time to train for battles, and of course, a clone trooper bar. It had the likes of everything they needed, though truthfully, the Council of Earth believed this would be such a good idea that they began the construction of a Republic Academy. It would be situated in the same vicinity as a clone trooper district. While the people of Earth weren't known for warfare, or even waging war in the slightest, they were continuously trying to earn the favor of the Chancellor and the Republic. It was hard for such a lavish system to be placed in the mid-rim. Not that mid-rim planets were bad by any means, but Earth was referred to as the Alderaan of the mid-rim. The people of Earth felt as if they should be treated like core citizens. They produced a hell of a lot of materials that planets around the Republic used, and truthfully, they liked the idea of being treated like they were in the core, especially being that they weren't often treated as such. Sure, tourism from the core world citizens was great, but even those from the core worlds looked down at the mid-rim system as a second-tier system in the greater galaxy. If the Copernican system could earn more favor with the Republic, then certainly there'd be no issue with securing bias from the rest of the galaxy. The truth is, the people of Earth worked best when they had a common goal, and when they focused on said common goal, they were nearly unstoppable. It was just simply a matter of having something to shoot for. Regardless, the facilities in Zhenzhou would be constructed quickly, and the shipyards across the Copernican system would begin to mass-produce Venators. The crazy thing is, the Copernican system did what the Kuat drive yards were known for, but better. Sometimes there would be systematic flaws in ships from the Kuat drive yards. Nothing too significant, but it always required an extra mechanic doing some after-release work. When ships came from Earth, they were completely finished, and they had absolutely no issues. The Copernican system also pumped out vessels with higher firing rates, using some of the technology they stole from the Trade Federation. There was also an undisclosed group of people from Earth. They lived on the moon orbiting Saturn called Titan, and they worked as mercenaries for the planet of Earth. They were rarely mentioned or ever talked about, but they were ever so swift. It wasn't against the rules per se, but it also wasn't respected when people raided battlefields and collected the spoils of war. These individuals were called the Titan Scavengers. What they did, and had been doing for centuries, was loot the wreckage of skirmishes and battlefields across the galaxy, bringing all the supplies back to the secret base on Titan, and then dispersing the materials back to Earth and the rest of the facilities around the system so they could use it for whatever, whether it be ships, buildings, technology, or whatnot. Truthfully, it worked to perfection, and it cost absolutely nothing. As for the pay of these mercenaries, they didn't need any. They were employees of the Council of Earth, and they were paid under the Space Institution of Earth. The Clone Wars got off to a rocky start for the Republic. While the Copernican system was able to prepare the cloning facilities for those who would be manning the Venators they built, the Separatists were marching into the mid-rim. A number of planets in the mid-rim were loyal to the Separatists, which made the Copernican system a troublesome area to be in. Though the defense fleet around the planet was terrific, and the new vessels that were created from the Copernican system went into war in the mid-rim, fighting for the Republic. The war would continue for several months. The Republic looked to be losing the fight when the Separatists would arrive outside of Earth with a massive fleet. Ironically, the fleet that would arrive was the original support fleet for the Malevolence. The fleet was still massive by every means, but the Titan Scavengers had just brought back their first recovered pieces from the dead moon on Antar, where the Malevolence crashed. The Scavengers found lots of parts from the EMP weapon and believed for them to be useful. When the Separatists sent their first attack force to Earth, they were blindsided. Former Trade Federation Lucrehulks, Republic capital ships, and the AI from the moon base launched a three-way attack. Some may call this a master flank, and truly, it was a master flank. As many of the humans on Earth would call this, a reverse Uno card. The Separatists would be locked into a gridlock, and they would have nowhere to go. Once Earth's moon deployed its interdiction field, the Separatists were doomed. And the best part of all of it was the ability to cash in on the spoils of war, of course. The defense line outside of Earth, being aided by the Earth-constructed Golan platforms, would be majorly successful that the Separatists wouldn't even think about coming back to the Copernican system. After nearly a year and a half of war, the Pride of the Core would be rolled off the assembly line at the Saturn drive yards. The escort fleet was already prepared and ready to meet up with it. When the Pride of the Core was unveiled to the Republic, Chancellor Palpatine personally hailed the Copernican system as the creators of the magnificent weapon that would see the downfall of the Confederacy. Palpatine was so pleased with his Super Star Dreadnought and wanted to order another one. Palpatine, before celebrating Naboo's joining of the Republic of centuries, would visit the Copernican system to personally thank the Council of Earth for the Pride of the Core. When he arrived, he found that the people of Earth had a surprise for him. They harvested the Malevolence, and they worked on its technology that was left behind, and had a new line of weapons and vessels for him and the Republic. He was overwhelmingly pleased. Earth's constant drive to be the best in the Republic proved to be a useful ally to him. Palpatine awarded the Copernican system with the title Pride of the Republic. While it wasn't necessarily in the core, nor could it ever be a part of the core physically, Palpatine decided to bestow the title to the planet so that they would consistently be, as such, the pride of the Republic. Palpatine also had a new request for them to work on, alongside of their new construction. While the Venator was a useful ship, and because of the Kuat drive yards and the shipyards at Ringo Vinda falling behind on production quotas, Palpatine requested that the Copernican System begin working on a new vessel for the future of the Republic. Wink wink. The blueprints were for a vessel that was much larger than the Venator, which meant that the Copernican System would have to expand their shipyard facilities, which was worth the price it would cost. As the second year of war whisked by, the Republic, led by General Skywalker, would push the Separatists out of the Mid-Rim, and the Outer Rim sieges would begin. The galaxy was on edge, waiting for the news that would come in next as the Jedi generals led their men on the battlefronts. Just as the Copernican System finished up its first wing of 5 Republic Star Destroyers, Coruscant was invaded. Earth would deploy the new vessels with their crews to assist at the Battle of Coruscant. The first day in the field for the Star Destroyers would be successful. To the people of Earth, it was yet another victory in their books, another success. A couple days later, everything would change. The Jedi Master and apprentice stationed on Earth would be executed for committing treason. Truthfully, the Council of Earth was outraged. How could the Jedi betray the Republic? It wouldn't be long until a longtime friend of the Copernican System would crown himself Emperor of the Galactic Empire, and the people of Earth would completely support it. Across the capital of Zhenzhou, the people would begin to put up signs telling all citizens to report Jedi if they were found. These signs would go up across the multitude of cities across Earth. One may assume this was concerning for the people in the Western Hemisphere of Eurasia that religiously believed in the Force, but truthfully, they believed in the Force, not the Jedi, nor were they loyal to the Jedi by any means. The people of Earth were extremely loyal to the Republic, newly crowned Empire. The Council of Earth would reach out to the Emperor and ask if there was anything in particular that they could do. The Emperor reported that after Tarkin went to Kamino to inform the Kaminoans of the changes to the cloning facilities, that he would be arriving in the Copernican System with a whole new boat of requests the Emperor had planned for them. The Emperor would tell them that he was entirely grateful for their loyalty and looked forward to what they would create in the coming years under the Empire. Our story continues days after the Empire was born. The Jedi were extinguished, and the people of the Copernican System rallied behind the strength of the newly crowned Emperor. While the Emperor was the new power in the galaxy, the democratic people of Earth still rallied behind him. In the old days, the Jedi were revered as heroes, though much like the rest of the Republic, the people of the Copernican System saw the Jedi as part of the problem during the Clone Wars. Dooku, having been the leader of the government that not only tried to overthrow the Republic, but led an aggressive invasion of Earth, was someone they didn't like. The people of Earth didn't take too kindly to that behavior, and while Dooku was no longer a Jedi, that didn't matter. He once was, and that permanently stained the reputation of the Jedi. As did their continuation in the war. It seemed as if they were just tools for the war machine, and instead of being the peacekeepers, the people of the old times referred to them as they were generals in that war. Was it wrong in theory? Possibly, but the people of Earth didn't know the plan that Palpatine created, nor did they know that he had orchestrated the entire Clone Wars. They were acting in the best interests of the global population, considering the global population was successful under the Republic, now the Empire. Throughout the star system, the Copernican System shipyards and drive yards were being retrofitted. Before Tarkin was set to arrive from his mission on Kamino, an Imperial fleet was deployed to protect the system. The fleet was installed because remnants of Separatist fleets still existed. Not all the droids were shut down, and a few of them were still serving under Cato-Neimoidian captains and admirals. The only real threat was in the Mid-Rim, so the Empire thought it best to protect the most pivotal system in the Mid-Rim. The people of Earth were especially proud to be Imperial because the Empire was consistently taking care of them. There was no evidence to prove the contrary. While the Saturn drive yards had been prepped to create Star Destroyers by the Republic, a new blueprint had been released for the Imperial Star Destroyer, which was ever so slightly larger than the Republic Destroyer. The Imperial vessel was also voided of having any color, similarly to the fleet stationed above Earth, which had no color either. The people of Earth didn't see this as an issue. Truthfully, it made the Imperial fleet seem as much more united than before, with no extra colors, symbols, or any extra looks to it. With the Venator fleet stationed above Earth, many children from Zhenzhou to Thebes would look to the skies at night to see the fleet with their own eyes. It wouldn't require a telescope, just their eyes. The fleet made many children and even young adults from across the entire planet want to travel to Zhenzhou and become admitted into the Imperial Academy. While Zhenzhou originally was meant for clones, the capital was retrofitted as well with the Republic Academy for people that wanted to be of aid to the war effort. When the war ended, the Academy would remain for the sole purpose of those who still wanted to serve the Empire. Eventually, after some time of Tarkin being on Camino and back and forth across the galaxy, he would arrive on Earth and meet with the top diplomats of the planet and Zhenzhou. Tarkin was enthralled to be here. He'd heard a lot of good things from the Emperor himself about Earth, and truthfully, dealing with the people of Earth was a lot more enjoyable than dealing with the ever-so-repugnant Kaminoans. They were rather annoying and they were rather greedy scientists. Tarkin couldn't wait to sink Tipoca City into the depths of the seas. Regardless, Tarkin would tell them that the Emperor intended on turning Earth into the central outpost in the Mid-Rim, though the way Tarkin worded it was up to the Copernican System if they wanted to play such a crucial role in Imperial success. Though the people of Earth were extremely eager to show their worth to the galaxy, still feeling as if they were undervalued by the core. The Copernican System finally had the chance to be recognized as a luxurious world, a part of the Empire. While Palpatine may have crowned Earth as pride of the Republic, the people of Earth still yearned for more. The core world still looked down on Earth as just a mere mid-rim world. With a common goal, the people of Earth could strive for anything, and right now, that anything was to be treated as well as the core worlds, which they were, but they were also wanted the classification of being a core world. Tarkin informed them that Palpatine still referred to them as Pride of the Empire, especially considering their superstar dreadnought, the Pride of the Core, was currently stationed outside of Coruscant. The people informed Tarkin that they would like to serve the Empire with loyalty till the end, to which he would inform them that Admiral Yularen would be dispatched to the Copernican System, a new system of the Empire called the Imperial Security Bureau. There was an ISB headquarters that was going to be set up on Coruscant, and the other one was going to be built on Earth. The Empire preferred it this way. With two separate ISB headquarters, one in the core and one in the mid-rim, the chances of individuals teaming up against the Empire and getting away with it would be rare. They'd heard about the Bad Batch not following orders on their mission to kill Saw Gerrera, and the Emperor wasn't thrilled to say the least. Sidious saw the clones as a means to an end, and it was time for their end to begin. He planned on phasing them out, and that would just simply be that. Tarkin also informed the people of Earth that they would retrofit the clone facilities into human facilities for Imperial recruits. He suggested that they enlarge it because Earth would become the center of Imperial recruitment in the Mid-Rim. While people of the core could mostly travel to Coruscant, Earth gave loyalists within the Mid-Rim a place to go. For the large extent of the Mid-Rim that originally sided with the Republic sided with the Empire. They hadn't been given any reason not to, though those that were formerly a part of the Separatists were split 50-50 between loyalty or dissatisfaction with the Empire. There were those of former Separatist worlds who would come to Earth to join the Imperial Academy of Zhenzhou, while others, like people who called Sereno home, would be reluctant to join the Empire, especially because their capital city was ripped apart by the Empire after the war ended. The first year after the Clone Wars would see a prideful Imperial expansion, with the Saturn drive yards producing Imperial Star Destroyers for the fleet, and the slow decommissioning of Venators. Earth was heralding in a new era of Imperial power. Tarkin would periodically check in, but the main Imperial officer that would be on Earth would be ISB Colonel, and that leader of operations within the facility, Yularen. Yularen would be transferred from Coruscant location to the Earth location consistently. With the Venator fleet over Earth being the last fleet of Venators in the Republic, the people of Earth would actually find honor, being that it was the Venators that came from or stationed above them. The pride of their success during the war that ravaged the galaxy was their defense fleet. The ISDs that Earth manufactured kept pace with the Kuat drive yards. There was something else incredibly important, the growth of new technology from the Empire. Tarkin, Palpatine, and Yularen would consistently have new blueprints for ships such as the Arrestor cruiser and the Interdictor-class destroyer. While these ships weren't large or required a lot of materials, they were quick to come out of the assembly line, though the Interdictor was a case that took a lot longer of time to complete. The ship was experimental, and the Saturn drive yards were working on fleshing it out so that it could be operable. Instead of Zhenzhou, Imperial senators from Earth would begin a new district, a scientific wing. Because the Saturn drive yards were working on interdictors, a small cruiser with the ability to pull other vessels out of hyperspace, they wanted to ensure they got the project right. The Council of Earth would also decide that the Empire now held a foothold on the galaxy, and it was time to decommission the Titan scavengers. The people of Titan were rather outraged at this, and while the Council of Earth believed this to be the best case, they made a special preparation for the Titan scavengers, though. The Titan scavengers would be turned into the Titan ravagers, as they would be promoted to serve under the Emperor's right-hand man. Nobody knew of him, and even the Council of Earth wasn't informed of who they would be serving under. All they knew is that he worked closely with the Emperor, and his initials were DV. He had no call sign and any recognizable rank within the Empire, but because the Titan scavengers had a solid reputation, at least on the Copernican System, they'd be given a chance to serve the greater Empire outside of the Copernican System. While originally they were skeptical, as loyalists to the Empire, they accepted their role, and soon came to rejoice in it, being special forces that worked under Lord Vader and Vader's Fist. Zhenzhou became the sight to see within the Empire. It was highly revered, with the second best academies in the galaxy for Imperials, falling shortly only behind Coruscant. As for the non-Imperial academies on Earth, they were ranked 3 and 4 in the galaxy, only being slightly edged out by the core worlds exclusively, those academies being in Thebes and the other one being in Zhenzhou. The Council of Earth continuously worked hard to ensure its places of academia were the best they could be, though being 3 and 4 in the galaxy wasn't good enough in their mind, though this brought people from all around the galaxy to both Zhenzhou and to Thebes. The capital of Earth was a nice mixing pot for people from across the galaxy to visit. It was full of districts that were a representation of those across the galaxy. Rhodia, Mon Calamari, and several others could find a place to call home on Earth and in Zhenzhou. It wasn't cheap to live on Earth, or within the Copernican System to begin with, though the best part about Earth was the people's willingness to welcome all species from across the galaxy. As rebellious worlds across the Mid-Rim fell to Imperial invasions, the people of Earth took note of it, though they believed in the Empire and the cause it stood for. 3,000 years of loyalty to the Republic, which was now the Empire, seemed to be a viable cause. Senators from Earth continued to be good representatives of the planet, and because they were good representatives, the people of Earth had no issue with the Empire. While Palpatine's plan included choking out star systems slowly and painfully, he would begin to levy harsher taxes on Mid-Rim worlds, though Earth wasn't one of the worlds that would face these taxes. Same with the planet of Naboo. The senators from the Copernican System knew this, and they were content with it. Being that most Mid-Rim worlds during the Clone Wars belonged to the Separatists, there was really no issue in their mind about it. Palpatine's use of the Imperial Senate helped people believe that democracy was still prevalent in the Empire, which was the point of the Imperial Senate. And while Palpatine crowned himself Emperor, the role initially seemed no different than the role of Chancellor of the Republic. Of course, for the Emperor, he would slowly siphon off power to himself, with no one noticing, while he continued to choke the galaxy. Everything at the Copernican System was successful, because it was treated as a loyal core world. It didn't receive the same treatment as Ryloth or Kamino. While yes, they were both worlds that belonged to the Republic, they had cases of individuals that could provide issue. Most of the core worlds didn't have rebellious leaders, and neither did Earth. Though, within a session of Senate, the senators from the Empire would be informed by the Emperor that Mandalore had fallen. Everyone kind of understood this to be a result of the siege on Mandalore at the end of the Clone Wars. No one actually had an issue with this. While the people of the Republic respected Mandalore's former leader, Duchess Satine, they lost a lot of respect for Mandalore after she was killed by her own people. Of course, Maul was the one to do it, but the people outside of Mandalore assumed it was a rebellion, and their rebellion was put in its place by the Republic at the end of the Clone Wars. The phasing of which Palpatine described it, it just seemed as if the Mandalorians were going to go out into the galaxy and cause harm like they did in the old days. The Imperial Senate was on board with the entire thing the Empire did to Mandalore. Of course, there were senators like Bail Organa and Mon Mothma that didn't agree with it, but truthfully, most of the Imperial Senate saw them as ungrateful, people who'd rather allow the galaxy be militaristically weak and didn't support the role that the Emperor played for the people of the galaxy. The people of Earth felt the same as their senators, and that was final, especially since Zhenzhou became the pride of the Mid-Rim, with new recruits flooding into the city to become some of the best Imperial naval officers the galaxy had. It was hard to get into Zenzao academies, but there were so many beings in the galaxy who had the opportunity to travel to Earth to join the academies of Zenzao. Everything would be successful for the planet Earth, and for the Empire for several years. As the years passed by, the Interdictor class was shipped off of the shipyards, and as for the new model of Star Destroyer, they were too produced through the Saturn drive yards and sent galaxy-wide. 7 years into the Empire, and the first round of heavy taxes would be levied against the Copernican System, Naboo, and the core. The people of Earth weren't actually too upset with this, because the taxes they paid to the Empire came back to them. The senators they voted into power also informed them that everything was fine. The senators from the core, others were part of Mon Mothma's and Organa's party, converged and discussed the heavy taxes, but they each expressed that as loyal worlds in the Empire, they were treated with great respect. Anaxis was given a surplus of new supplies to outfit their citizens with better power, Corellia was given a new space yard, and as for Earth, they were gifted by the Empire enough to supply the expansion of the Saturn drive yards. And while one may assume this was a backhanded gift, the truth is, while industry across the Copernican system slowed down, it was their shipyards and their drive yards that allowed them to continue to produce mass amounts of credits. Yet another reason why the Copernican system was sold on serving the Empire, being as the Empire continuously used their taxes that they received on the betterment of the systems that supported it. The Empire thrived off of loyalty and built up on that loyalty. Then Earth would come to learn about the rebels. Though they weren't rebels in the eyes of the people from Earth, these were selfish insurgents working under Saw Gerrera. See along the posters of Hunt Down the Jedi and Report Jedi across the galaxy, a name emerged, and it was a radical insurgent by the name of Saw Gerrera. Ever since his escape thanks to the Bad Batch's failure at the end of the Clone Wars, he'd been out in the galaxy, rampaging along, making people suffer. No one really knew why he was acting so malignantly, but people couldn't stand him. For the hopeless, he didn't offer freedom. For the poor, he didn't give them a way out. For those lost because of the Empire, he didn't give them light. Saw was definitely fighting for a better cause, but he went about it in a way that cost innocent civilians lives. He didn't just target clones or stormtroopers, he targeted the weak, those who couldn't defend themselves. And this scared away any soul that could be on the fence about the Empire, especially on worlds like Naboo and Earth. Truthfully, Saw scared people on Naboo and Earth, especially Earth, because of their massive array of Imperial facilities. This wouldn't do anything but make the people of Earth decide that their money better spent on their own protection, and even on finding these mercenaries and making them pay and suffer for their betrayal against the Empire. Earth would go as far to hire paid mercenaries and bounty hunters to hunt down Saw, though none of these efforts would suffice. The Council of Earth did this, not because of propaganda, but because of their location in the Mid-Rim. They were located in an area that Saw would have no issue getting to, though thanks to the elite fleet stationed above the planet, it was rare to imagine that Saw could find himself on-world, but that never stopped him and his band of insurgents before. And then the security on Earth mounted up. It wasn't a hostile takeover, but Imperial Star Destroyers outside of the main fleet would be dispatched around the Copernican System, especially at the Saturn drive yards, and a show of Imperial strength would sit high above the capital city of Zenzao. Why? The Emperor was here, and he was here for a special purpose, traveling with some of his best troops, admirals, and officers around the galaxy. The one face that wasn't present at this meeting was the ever-elusive Darth Vader. No one knew anything about him, but he wasn't there. The Emperor was announcing the creation of a new project, one that would be created thanks to the loyalty of the Copernican System. Scientist Galen Erso would be brought in to announce the creation of the project in a positive light. There was no name for it, at least a name that would be revealed to the people of Earth, only known as Project Stardust. Palpatine had a name for it, the Death Star, but that name wasn't openly discussed in front of the project. On another note, the only other reason the Emperor was in the Copernican System, to disclose it, was because of their drive yards, and some of their industrial complexes across the system that were going to be converted into labor camps. The Emperor didn't specifically say that they were labor camps, but he did tell the people that people across the galaxy would be placed on Mars, Titan, and the multitude of other planets within the Copernican System to help work on these projects. It wasn't a negative project and it would benefit the longevity of the Empire, he would say. It would bring in credits to the star systems and it would only allow the Empire to thrive more. And while the Emperor had his show of power present over the Copernican System, capital of Zenzao, the people pridefully looked up at it. With the Emperor's arrival and announcement of his new project that would heavily involve the people of the Copernican system, fireworks was set off over the city of Zenzal. Of course, the Emperor ended his speech with referring to Earth as pride of the Empire. It was a great name for the people of the Copernican system, and to hear that they were so highly appreciated made them all the more happy with the Empire. The Council of Earth would ask the Emperor in their meetings about the rise of the Mid-Rim insurgents, to which the Emperor promised it wouldn't be of any harm to them. Pride of the Empire hit an all-time high, and it would continue this way. While the senators slowly lost power inside the Imperial Senate, it didn't really matter to them, the reason being that it was taken away without really impeding their actions. Plus, whenever a new senator was elected to office, they wouldn't really notice any change considering they were new to office, especially being that on Earth, term limits were rather short, because so many people were consistently trying to join the Imperial Senate, advertising business, and the programs of which had advertising were showing competitors constantly. A lot of credits came in during voting season on Earth. Though in the Mid-Rim, as the years passed by, there seemed to be an issue. That was the growth of insurgency. The strike at Aldhani woke up the Empire. There was a great mass confusion of what happened. The people of the galaxy fixated their eyes to the Mid-Rim to see what was happening, and it was the Empire tightening their grip around the necks of the weak and telling them they couldn't continue to act so repugnant towards the Imperial reign. The loss of Aldhani woke up the rest of the galaxy that no longer should these individuals be taken lightly. These insurgents were everywhere. It was more than just Saw at this point, and they were multiplying. Not long after Aldhani was hit, there would be a massive skirmish at Ferric. Not too long after that, on Lothal. The Empire seemed as if it was struggling to keep a grip on the galaxy that it was supposed to control, though the people of Earth stuck with their loyalties. During this period of time, an individual from the Imperial ranks would reach out to Earth. The Death Star project was going well, and many of the key pieces of infrastructure that would help construct the massive space station were already being sent off from the Copernican System to Scarif, so that they could be added to the nearly finished Death Star. Though this voice had been silenced multiple times, and he believed that his project was notable, he traveled to Earth before going out to Lothal to deal with the rebels and the Ghost Squadron. His name was renowned across the galaxy. He was Grand Admiral Thrawn. He was visiting with Yularen originally because there had been rumors about an Imperial spy in the ranks of the fleet deployed over Ryloth and Lothal, and they weren't sure which it was. Though once ISB Colonel Yularen and Thrawn got to talking, especially after the topic of the Imperial spy, they discussed the TIE Defender program. Yularen told Thrawn that he should consider reaching out to the Council of Earth to see if they wanted to work on the project here on Earth. Thrawn told Yularen that he was planning on building it out on Lothal and testing it in the field there. If there were insurgents on Lothal, then there were chances that they would try and disrupt his plans. Thrawn actually agreed with this, but he said that no one would take up the project. It was being put aside for the project of Stardust. Thrawn believed his resources were better fit for the TIE Defender program, especially because the insurgents fought in small groups, not entire planets. Yularen gave Thrawn some contact information for the Earth shipyards. Yularen informed him that they would likely be able to do testing directly from the planet itself. Thrawn was greatly appreciative, and so he reached out to Yularen's contact, and within hours they would respond with an astounding excitement. They would inform Thrawn that they'd pick up the project and start it in a safe distance from Zenzal in the Mongolian desert. Thrawn would have to depart, but he gave them all the blueprints and the scientists that had been working on the design with him to the Earth shipyards. The people of Earth would alert their scientists from the Saturn drive yards, and she would personally oversee the construction of the TIE Defender to make sure it would be an adequate transformation into what Thrawn envisioned. When the TIE Defender was presumed ready, it would do a test run in the Mongolian desert, and then it would take a hefty flight from Earth to Saturn's moon of Titan. The few months it took to develop the TIE Defender would be a complete success, and with Thrawn returning to see its success, he would request that Earth build a fleet worth of TIE Defenders. Of course, the people of Earth were willing to oblige. They were responsible for the Pride of the Corps, the first super-class dreadnought, pieces of Project Stardust, the first Republic Star Destroyers, the upgraded Imperial 2 Star Destroyers, and now the TIE Defender. When the first 3 squadrons were produced, they would fly by show for the people of Zenzal all the way to Thebes. Of course, it would be celebrated on Earth's Empire Day, a day formerly known as Republic Day. The day was a celebration of Earth's time, a part of the Republic, and now the Empire. Thrawn would receive these 3 squadrons of TIE Defenders, and he would use a squadron of ace pilots to gift them the keys to the TIE Defenders. These ships were an absolute beast of fighter class. They were implanted with hyperdrives for short-range jumping. They also had shield generators and an array of weapons that could take down an Imperial Star Destroyer by itself. While it took long enough of a period for the TIE Defender to be built, the fuel depot on Lothal would be destroyed, accompanying the death of Jedi Knight Kanan Jarrus. Though by the time it seemed as if the insurgents had a chance to defeat the Empire at Lothal, the TIE Defenders were released and the remaining members of the Ghost Squadron would be hunted down and defeated. Thrawn saw the importance of the TIE Defender, and because of his success, he would send the squadrons out to other locations across the galaxy, in which the insurgents were causing the Empire issues. The Empire would place an order for tens of thousands of TIE Defenders, and the people of Earth would of course be compensated well for it. The rebellion would find a chance to spread out across the galaxy, and when the chance to strike at the heart of the Empire came, the rebels took it, though with Thrawn near the system of Scarif for his triumphant victory at Lothal. The rebels had amassed a small fighting force, and they currently were working through beating down the 2 Imperial Star Destroyers stationed over the shield gate of Scarif. Because Scarif was an Imperial-based facility, it hadn't received any TIE Defenders yet. Thrawn had replenished his forces with the TIE Defenders, and now harbored 4 squadrons inside of his flagship. Before Admiral Raddus could take control of the fleet battle over Scarif, the Chimera and her support fleet would arrive out of hyperspace. The rebels would be blindsided by it. In the Chimera's support fleet, there was an interdictor, so the rebel fleet had no room to escape. By the time Admiral Raddus and his MC-75 could turn itself on to face the Imperial fleet, he was facing down bombing runs by one of those squadrons of TIE Defenders. The other 3 squadrons had defended off into 3 separate groups. One started hunting down the fragile old Y-Wings, another one was taking down support ships, and finally the last one engaged in fighter-to-fighter combat. The issue is, none of these rebel pilots had ever seen or faced the TIE Defender, let alone heard of them. Anyone who faced them didn't live to tell the tale. For the rebels, they assumed the loss at Lothal was an unfortunate set of events, which truthfully, it was, but it was at the hands of the TIE Defender. When the Chimera's turbo lasers opened fire, it was doomed for the rebellion. Support ships melted under the pressure, and a few people who had fear and tried to retreat were sucked out of hyperspace by the interdictor and slaughtered as well. Thrawn stood on his bridge, watching the rebel effort crumble before his very eyes, and it brought him nothing but joy. He had no rambunctious, power-hungry officers trying to vie for a power position. Instead, he was having them all listen to him. All orders were understood and processed, and the Death Star would arrive. The shield gate would be opened, and within moments, the Death Star would fire a single reactor blast to the surface of the planet before the shield gate would close and seal the rebels in, killing them all. Tarkin would contact Thrawn and congratulate him on his successes. Thrawn and Tarkin had some issues, especially because the Emperor favored Project Stardust over the TIE Defender project. When the TIE Defender became almost the sole reason for consistent victory across the Empire, it seemed as if it was because the TIE Defender was present. Another great thanks to Earth would come from this. With the death of the Rebel fleet, Leia Organa, and any chance for the Rebels to discover the Death Star plans, the Rebel Council would disperse in fear. Sure, there would be those still willing to fight, but their fight would begin to diminish greatly. Though something that would affect Earth was the dissolution of the Imperial Senate that shortly followed the Battle of Scarif. But by the time the Imperial Senate was taken down, the Senators' roles were so little that it didn't really make much of a difference. There was plenty of democracy spread out across the greater Empire, and Earth was one of them, but truthfully the Emperor didn't diminish their feelings for him. While he was the sole leader of the galaxy, he hadn't wronged them in nearly 30 years of public service. Looking back at the track record, he was a leader of the galaxy for an entire generation of adults that had only seen Palpatine as their only leader. Older generations remembered Chancellor Valorum and the tremendous failure of a leader that he was, and the few that were alive before Valorum's reign didn't praise that Chancellor either. Palpatine was a continuous positive in the galaxy. Was it brilliant politics? Possibly. But the truth is, generations saw Palpatine as the one singular positive, with nothing negative to say about him. As Emperor, he was rarely seen, like most politicians, making the news once every blue moon. The politicians on Earth who were a rarity to see, were more common to see than Palpatine himself. And the truth is, as long as the Copernican system was succeeding, no one really cared about what Palpatine did, because it was very evident that his work as Emperor kept them safe from the insurgents and kept them prosperous. With the heavy defeat of the rebellion over Scarif, the death of the Ghost Squad at Lothal, the death of Saw Gerrera at Jeddah, and the disbursement of the Rebel Council, there isn't really any real sign of insurgency left in the galaxy. Bail Organa, having no role left in the galaxy, would reach out to Ben Kenobi and inform him of the importance that he had now. While the rebels were defeated over Scarif without any survivors, the Death Star would remain hidden over Scarif, without any reason to show itself off. Ben Kenobi would work his hardest to get a hold of Luke, and start training him in the ways of the Force, and yet, Uncle Omen kept restricting Luke. It would take time for Luke to even start making headway to escape Tatooine, but it wouldn't work. While he would eventually get off the planet with Obi-Wan, it wouldn't make a difference. It was too difficult to get anywhere. The only chance for the rebellion had come and gone, and the few people who wanted to resist the Empire would give up. There was nothing they could do. It took organized rebellion 19 years to come together, and it was completely wiped out within the span of a month. The TIE Defender program would be the final war machine produced by the Copernican System for centuries. Emperor Palpatine would use a cloning program to continue his lifespan and continue his longevity of Emperor of the Galaxy. While he was the Sith and had absolute power, he didn't choke out the Loyalist planets. Those with rebellious tendencies were dealt with accordingly. But our story continues shortly after the defeat of the rebellion over Scarif. The battle saw the end of everyone that aided the rebels and their fight against the Empire, and now the galaxy seemed united. The TIE Defender was one of the prided constructions of the Copernican System, and Grand Admiral Thrawn, responsible for the defeat of the rebels at Scarif, was enthralled with his project's success. While the test of the first reactor blast of the Death Star at Scarif was an overwhelming victory, there was absolutely no reason for the Empire to use the Death Star. The rebellion was squashed. There was no resistance in the galaxy anymore. The people of Earth felt that their faith in the Empire was rightly placed, and so they were rewarded for their hard work in helping maintain peace in the galaxy. While the Emperor was rather disappointed in Thrawn for going behind his back, he was thrilled with the fact that the rebellion was squashed, and more than anything, the TIE Defender project played a real part in that process. The Emperor would go on a galaxy-wide tour, a victory tour if you will, as a boost for morale of the star systems under the control of the Empire. While yes, there are plenty of provinces that didn't belong to Imperial territory, this victory tour was intended to bolster inspiration for more recruits to join the Empire. While the rebels hadn't become a galaxy-wide threat at their highest peak, they did have people, especially in the mid-rim, on edge that they might be attacked. It's why the Copernican System supplied Grand Admiral Thrawn with the TIE Defender project. The Emperor traveled around the galaxy, and the morale of the United Empire was higher than ever before. There was no reason to doubt the success that they had, and yet there was still more they could do. The Emperor made a note to the loyal systems of the Empire that there would be a tournament of sorts. The most loyal worlds in the galaxy would have their pickings of an outer rim world that they wanted to colonize. Essentially meaning that a system backed by the Empire could conquer an outer rim world and take it over, use its resources, and make it better. This was actually brilliant on part of the Emperor. It meant that systems would pay their own credits, supply their own military, and take over the scum-ridden worlds across the outer rim without making the Empire have to pay for it. This meant the greater Empire didn't have to employ its resources to go into the outer rim and deal with the last of the pirates. While yes, the greatest threat in the outer rim was destroyed nearly a decade before in Crimson Dawn, the Empire still had no grip in the Outer Rim. Now Palpatine made an effort to tell the systems in this competition that they could not compete with each other. They could not take another planet from each other, and they were to work together. There were no rivalries, no matter how friendly or hostile they got. Palpatine was very incredibly sure to make sure everyone was aware of that. The point of this operation was to get rid of the scum in the Outer Rim, and so the competition began. And while all the core worlds were vying for the best Imperial admirals to lead the operation, the Copernican System was the one to get a hold of Grand Admiral Thrawn. He enjoyed the idea of this little sport, and of course he was going to support the planet that helped him secure the greatest advantage during the Rebel incursion. The Rebellion's war effort wasn't referred to as a galactic civil war, rather it was just referred to as the Great Rebel Incursion. Regardless, the Chimera and her fleet were deployed into the Outer Rim, and within a matter of hours, hours, the planet of Tatooine would be captured by Thrawn and his forces. He would send death troopers down to the surface and have Jabba the Hutt and his band of minions executed. The bounty hunters were given the option to serve the Empire or die, and so many of them surrendered themselves over to the Empire. The focus of the Copernican system would turn Tatooine into the Canto Bight of the Outer Rim. While Canto Bight surely was out there as a star system, the Copernican system saw value in Tatooine, especially with the opportunity to build up a gambling industry on the planet. While yes, gambling was bad, and that was very obvious, it was a great way for the people of Earth to generate more income for their system. Though the first and most important step in this process was clearing up Tatooine. The planet was a dust bowl in between the greedy little gremlins called Jawas and the ever so desolate people of the sand. Tatooine wasn't exactly the most exciting place in the galaxy to travel to. Considering the academy at Zhenzhou was full of excited individuals to jump to the front lines, the Copernican system would first send a group of newly graduated stormtroopers to the sands of Tatooine. While officials who now ran the planet never visited, they took a large bit of their budget and began directing it towards Tatooine. Scientists from the Copernican system were also present, because they believed there should be a natural water source on the planet, and so the scientists were trying to figure out how the water would be able to stay on Tatooine under the two suns and all the heat that accumulated under them, as well as how cold it tended to get at nighttime. The scientists spent several months doing this, while at the same time all three of the largest districts, Mos Espa, Mos Eisley, and Anchorhead, were receiving new buildings. This was incredible for the people of Tatooine. Their cities began to stick out of the desert incredibly. Of course, the people of Earth knew how to build terrific cities on Tatooine. They had built them all across the Arabian Peninsula. Once the three largest cities were built up with skyscrapers that from the ground looked as if they could touch the two suns, a new economic system was put in place. The Copernican system expected flack from the people of Tatooine, which is why stormtroopers were present, but the only flack they got back was from the Jawas, who were arrested in massive droves because of their tendency to pirate materials away from others and sell them at a higher price. They were greedy little buggers, and so the Empire dealt with them. The Tuskens, on the other hand, were left alone. Moisture farming as a whole began to disappear off the planet. The economy of Tatooine began to evolve to fit in on a galactic level. Of course, one would assume that the people would dislike the change, but the change was actually good. Tatooine was finally getting the attention it needed for over millennia. The planet was left out to dry during the era of the Republic, and now they finally had someone paying for what they needed and couldn't collectively afford themselves. Especially without the scourge of the Hutts, the people of Tatooine were able to thrive and expand. The vast cities became icons on the Outer Rim. Something about the Copernican system was highly evident. Their thousands of years of grinding to catch up to the rest of the galaxy made them the perfect outlet for creating solid growth on a planet that struggled to find itself as a place of refuge in the galaxy. Within a year and a half, the cities would tower above the sands, and within the span of 3 years, Tatooine would have the first ocean in 1,000 years. Originally, Tatooine was a water world, much like Kamino, but after thousands of years, it became a desolate sand dune. The ocean would sit nicely between the cities, and it would be an outlet of a tropical haven for wary travelers from across the galaxy. The core worlds who took over the other planets in the Outer Rim began to struggle. They didn't really have the resources to successfully build up on those planets, so the planets struggled under Imperial occupation. Other planets from the Outer Rim began to heavily migrate to Tatooine because at this point it was still affordable to the average individual and the average family in the Outer Rim. The people of Earth ensured that others in the Outer Rim would have the distinct possibility to travel to Tatooine with a discounted price. This was also an ingenious idea because it drew people away from other planets in the Outer Rim, and it also meant that Tatooine would become the focal point of resurgence in the Outer Rim. Originally, the plan was to turn Tatooine into a gambling hub, inspired by the success of Canto Bight, but what ended up happening instead was the growth in the economic sector, and also the very popular pod racing, which became more of a professional league with the Empire supporting it, mostly the Copernican system. Credits were credits, and what would the Empire say? Not like they would just say no to more credits. They made pod racing a galaxy-wide league with a pro league and an amateur league. The Copernican System took a hold of this and ran with it, making everything of this league a little more professional and a lot more serious. Especially without the involvement of the Hutts or pirates, average people had the opportunity to succeed. Though with the success of pod racing, Mos Espa became a gambling capital in the Outer Rim. Massive casinos were placed all across the city, and people relished in the growth. Of course, as gambling does, there were downsides, but the truth is, the house always wins, and the house in this situation was not just the Copernican System, but the Empire. Regardless, the Empire itself was looking stronger than ever. While there were cases of rebellion all across the galaxy in certain circumstances, the sight was very rare, and every time it appeared, it was immediately squandered. The Empire was very militaristically strong, and that was ever so apparent, though there were issues arising in the core, especially on the planet of Coruscant, though none of these issues were brought to light. One of the issues was the Emperor using the Force to transfer his essence into another body. The public wouldn't notice anything different. Palpatine had a tendency to show himself off through hologram, and the hologram resembled the face of a man who hadn't been damaged badly. While he told the entire galaxy he was badly scarred by the Jedi, he was rarely ever seen in person. He appeared before the Senate, while the Senate was still existent, though he always wore a robe that covered his head, so the essence transfer wouldn't really change anything from the public perspective of him, though for those closest to him this would create an issue, especially with the second in command, his agent of chaos, Lord Vader. While the Jedi had been wiped out almost entirely, Vader had an issue with his master using the Force to get himself a new body without ever showing him how to escape the living hell he existed in. Vader would challenge his master in a duel, and during the duel of which Palpatine was winning, he would deploy his frightening new student, Mara Jade, onto Vader, and Sidious and his student would kill Vader. It was a tragic conclusion to the travesty of a life that Skywalker, or Vader, had to live. But it didn't matter to Sidious. He now had his student in Mara Jade. She was a fiery young individual, and she was trained by Sidious essentially from birth. She would bring in a new era of the Empire, at least in her master's eyes. Mara had every reason to be loyal. She hadn't had any inclination to fear her master or what he would do to her. That lasted very well until shortly after the death of Vader, and when she was tasked with killing the remaining members of the Inquisitorius. It wasn't the fact that she had to kill people who used the Force. For Mara, it was more the fact that she had to kill people who spent nearly 2 decades serving the Emperor and the Empire, especially the Grand Inquisitor, who was never killed by the rebels on Lothal. Though Mara was secretly okay with it. See, Mara Jade never got outside of her training grounds. She never saw much of the Empire or the leadership role her master played. While she was a Sith, and that was the simple truth, she had an issue with her master. This didn't happen overnight, but it did take several years. Just about 20 years after the Battle of Scarif, otherwise known as ABS, she decided she had enough. The previous 20 years were terrific for the greater empire. Any sign of rebellion was crushed, and Mara was known throughout the ranks of the empire. She had her favorites in the ranks of the empire, and she built a following of loyal imperial officers. It originally was simply innocent following, but as the years began to pass by, and the need to ascend the imperial ranks headed to the forefront of their minds, she slowly began to resent her master, as did the officers that followed her. Palpatine had 40 years as an emperor of the galaxy, 50 years as leader of the Republic and of the Empire. Mara Jade believed that his reign deserved to come to an end, especially because she believed that the throne belonged to her. She saw error with some of Palpatine's habits. For example, Mara didn't agree with the enslavement of the Wookiees and the other outcast civilizations across the galaxy. While this may have been common knowledge to high-ranking Imperial officials like Mara Jade, this wasn't common knowledge for most of the systems across the Empire. Only high-ranking Imperial officers knew of this. Most common folk never heard of it. Speaking of high-ranking Imperial officers, Grand Moff Tarkin had passed away of a natural death, and the galaxy was remembering him for the hero he was not just during the Clone Wars, but for his dedication to the Empire and serving it for the entire duration of his life. Tarkin was one of the last remaining individuals who had served both the Empire and the Republic to die in servitude to the Empire. During this day of remembrance across the galaxy, rebellion would arise, though it wouldn't be in the same form as it was with the rebel incursion of Zero ABS. It would come strictly from within the ranks of the Empire. Mara Jade spent the latter part of 20 ABS to gather up a garrison of Imperials who believed they could take over the Empire and run it better than the established government. Most of these officers had resentment for individuals like Grand Admiral Thrawn and Moff Gideon who had favorability with the Emperor. It was an ego battle, and because they were losing, they could only result to violence. It was in their nature. Inferior individuals always turn to violence when the odds are against them, especially in the mental realm. This was the same here. And so, when Mara believed her legions were ready, she poisoned Grand Moff Tarkin, knowing that the galaxy would remember him for his service, and then she would strike. Mara Jade's forces would steal the only Mega-class Star Dreadnought in the Imperial fleet. It was built at the Saturn Drive Yards, but it was currently stationed over Molinist for testing purposes. The entire support fleet was a collection of Jade loyalists. Most of the galaxy wouldn't know about this incursion, though it would be heavily evident in the core that rebellion had returned. Though this wasn't any regular rebellion, this was a ready force that could overthrow the central government of the Empire, and at the moment it seemed like it was making headway through an axis. One may ask why they didn't start with Coruscant. The answer is simple. Coruscant was too highly defended. The Jade Loyalists would likely be able to draw the main fleet out of Coruscant, and then they can march on it and take the capital out from Palpatine. When the messages reached Coruscant, Palpatine was outraged. He honestly couldn't believe the fact that Mara would betray him like this, but he figured he could put another rambunctious student in their place, and so called together a council of the best minds in the Empire. At the very least, those who hadn't betrayed the Empire. Emperor Palpatine informed them that their security should be placed at the highest regard and ensure that they deal with these insurgents as fast as they can. Palpatine wasn't playing around, and so Thrawn was placed at the top of Imperial command to deal with these insurgents. Thrawn and the Chimera were stationed above Coruscant, and he strategically laid out plans for a galaxy-wide conflict. He practiced on this map this large for pure enjoyment of the hunt. It was a strategy game in his own mind, and as of now, the Empire didn't know how large Mara's loyalists were. It could be multiple fleets, or it could just be one fleet with a really big ship. All he knew is that the superstar dreadnought in the Imperial fleet wouldn't be large enough to handle the firepower of the supremacy. Luckily, the Empire, per directive of Thrawn, was producing a new leg of Imperial war machines called the Resurgent-class Star Destroyer. These vessels were much larger than the traditional Star Destroyer, and they packed much more of a punch than the traditional Star Destroyer. Of course, the only issue is that a few of them were finished and they were only stationed over the Kuat Drive Yards and at the Saturn Drive Yards. And Thrawn wasn't too sure if he just wanted to give them up or move the vessels around. Thrawn knew that if Coruscant wasn't the next target, then one of the Emperor's prized shipyards would become the next target for Mara Jade. Thrawn knew Mara personally, and while he knew she was bright, he wasn't exactly sure she was a tactical genius, even with the force she had surrounding her. Thrawn had much more experience under his belt, and in Thrawn's mind, experience outweighed everything. Regardless, there was a bigger issue than the Mega-class Star Dreadnought, and that was the fact that Imperial rebels had TIE defenders. This would be a true contest of superiority. Though the Emperor and the Military Council made a point of keeping this knowledge secret from the population of the greater galaxy. They didn't want anyone in fear of this rebellion, and they certainly didn't want systems rallying behind this rebellion. Palpatine was sure to keep the Jade Loyalists away from the public eye, and away from being able to send out a message to the rest of the galaxy. Mara wasn't focused on that. She was focused on taking over Coruscant and killing Palpatine, and her officers were too. There's a reason why these officers were intimidated by Thrawn and the other high-ranking Imperial officers who were completely calculated in all of their work. These officers were brutes, and their brains were functional enough to turn on the engine of a pod racer, and that was the best-case scenario for most of them. After the defeat of the Empire at Anaxis, the Jade Loyalists would move their fleet into deep space and completely confuse the Empire. The Imperial forces would continue to stay stationed at their current locations, while Imperial High Command at the Kuat Drive Yards and the Saturn Drive Yards were encouraged to focus their construction on the Resurgent-class Star Destroyers and mass-produce them as fast as they could, fill them up with fully armed crews and await further orders from the High Council. They understood their orders and got straight to work. There wouldn't be any hint of activity from the Jade loyalists for 3 weeks. While the people of Anaxis picked up the pieces quietly, without anyone across the Empire knowing it due to no news coverage, no travel, or no individuals going in or out of the planet, Anaxis went dark, and no one questioned it, because at the space yards, they were informed that Anaxis was dealing with a nebulous storm that caused all their electricity and circuitry to dysfunction, which meant that ships couldn't travel to Anaxis without being in danger to others or themselves. This obviously wasn't true, but it was enough for the public to believe it to be true. After 3 weeks, the Jade Loyalists would arrive at a hyperspace outside of the Copernican System. The people of Imperial High Command sent out a distress signal with the word help, before communications leaving the Copernican System were shut down. The entire planet went into high alert, and the shield gate over Earth was opened up, locking down the entire planet, not allowing travel in or out. Imperial High Command directed the AI from the moon base to ready themselves, while at the same time bringing the 6 Resurgent-class Star Destroyers to the back lines to defend the shield gate, while the several Golan platforms defended Earth from the Supremacy. Once the Supremacy and her support fleet got into combat with the security of the Imperial Earth, they met stiff resistance. The Copernican System was prepared for any incursion, and while the people of Earth may have been unaware, they were well aware now. Thrawn deployed the 3rd Fleet from Kuat towards the Copernican System, as well as dispatching his own fleet with the Chimera and 2 Superstar Dreadnoughts to the Copernican System as well. This left the ancient Pride of the Core to defend Coruscant, as Thrawn moved back the fleet from Corellia and the fleet from Cato Nemodia to return to Coruscant and defend the planet in his absence. This was a ticking time bomb for the Jade Loyalists. They needed to crack through the Copernican System defenses before Thrawn arrived. Mara chose the Copernican System because, as she knew, the planet was well defended, but she believed it would be a crippling blow to the Empire, especially because it would take longer for the core support fleet to arrive out than it would for a fleet to arrive if they had attacked Kuat instead. This battle wasn't an overwhelming success initially. The Star Destroyers that were stationed to protect the Supremacy were no match for the Resurgent-class Star Destroyers, but once the Supremacy and her weapons came into range, it ripped through the Star Destroyers defending Earth. The Golan platforms were no use against the heavy, long-range cannons of the Supremacy, and so Mara was able to park her ship out of range and fire the long-range weaponry at the Star Destroyers. It really was cheating, but she didn't care. It forced the defense fleet to head into close combat with the Supremacy. The AI fighter fleet was also ripped to shreds thanks to the numerous squads of TIE defenders that Mara's fleet possessed. On the other hand, the TIE defenders defending Earth weren't piloted by experienced pilots. The only pilots on the planet were the best at the Imperial Flight Academy and Zhenzhou. While they were the best on this side of the galaxy, they were no match for weathered pilots who had been putting down insurgencies and civilizations for decades. The Battle of Earth was heavy. To the people on the ground, they noticed that the vessel constructed at the Saturn drive yards was being used against them. The Supremacy was massive, even considering its distance from Earth. It was very visible from the ground with the naked eye, even during daylight. The people of Zhenzhou were terrified, but the leaders of the Council of Earth informed the people that there was no reason to fret. Emperor Palpatine was sending his best troops to protect them from this insurgency. The battle raged on though. It was more of a siege than anything, but the defenses of the Copernican System made it more of a battle. The battle itself raged on for hours, giving time for the hypervelocity cannon stationed on the moon to be able to tilt around into view of the Supremacy, of which Mara Jade would order her support ships in the way, but not soon enough. The hypervelocity cannon would rip through the port side cannon compartment of the vessel. Mara would panic. This meant that there was almost no plausible escape for her. She looked over her support ships. There was 1 Star Destroyer remaining, and so she ran from the bridge of the Supremacy. While the Supremacy was laying down the heat and just about to break, the hypervelocity cannon changed the game. Mara and her overly confident officers believed Earth's systems would be easy to penetrate, and that was far from the truth. The Copernican System had a lot of top-secret bases and defenses that were only known to Thrawn and the Emperor, mostly because they were approved by Thrawn and the Emperor to be built. Of course, it was customary for systems, especially loyal to the Emperor, Emperor to ask for permission to do something. It wasn't really required. Mara was never really aware of these, and while there was a lot of debris left over Earth, it would be salvaged and reused in the construction of new vessels. Shortly after the first strike of the hypervelocity cannon, Grand Admiral Thrawn would arrive out of hyperspace in his flagship and the rest of the vessels, and they would blindside a weakened Supremacy. Because Mara fled the Supremacy, there were chances to rid the ship of its crew and continue to use the massive Star Destroyer. Within a matter of hours, the insurgency would be destroyed, and the Supremacy would survive a rough encounter with Earth's defense system. While victory was terrific to the people of Earth, there was something rather unnerving about this. People began to question what the Empire was hiding from them, being that there was a second rebellion this large in 20 years that had enough of an impact to draw in the attention of the Copernican System. Was it possible that the Empire was wrong? All of the Jade Loyalist survivors of the Battle of Earth would be executed for betraying the Empire, and those who served valiantly would be given promotions. Many people on the Copernican System began to consider if there were actual issues with the Empire, and while they would continue to get support and financial stability from the Saturn drive yards, and continuously growing the economy on Tatooine, the lavish lifestyle would continue. Though these questions were reasonably drawn, their faith in their Emperor would be tested as a rising darkness began to cross the far side of the galaxy, something so unnatural it upset the balance of everything in the galaxy, even the Force. Our story continues on Earth, weeks after the Jade Insurgency. The people of Earth began to question their loyalty to the Emperor. While it wasn't the entirety of the planet, there was a solid portion of the population that was genuinely concerned with the consistent uprisings in the galaxy. First, it was a rebellion, and now it was a Jade Insurgency. Sure, there was a 2-decade gap in between those two insurgencies, but it felt like too many for the Empire to be dealing with in such a short period of time. The age of the High Republic didn't see this many insurgencies, other than those in the reaches of the Outer Rim on territorial colonized worlds, which that wasn't the case here. The rebellion threatened worlds across the Mid-Rim, and while the battle over the Death Star wasn't a publicly known incident, nor was the construction of the Death Star, the people of Earth found the Jade Insurgency something much more concerning. The reason the Jade Insurgency was so concerning was because of how close to home it could have hit. There was still visible debris over Earth in the waning weeks after the battle, and to the people of Earth, this was mildly concerning. They saw this as a sign of the peace they'd almost lost, as it was recently confirmed that Anakin was a victim of the Jade Insurgency, rather than it being some sort of nebula that shut down the systems of the entire planet. The people of the galaxy were starting to question Palpatine. Sure, he was on his victory tour to build up morale, but Imperial morale was an all-time low. For the people of the Empire, they were concerned if it was their military forces, and if they would feel any desire to rebel again, especially being that the insurgency utilized Imperial technology a lot more than the rebellion itself did. On another note, the people of Earth were clearing up the mess above their system. It was a real shame because half of the vessels destroyed in orbit were produced by the Saturn drive yards, though most of the vessels destroyed were those that defended Earth, such as the Resurgent-class Star Destroyers that went toe-to-toe with the Supremacy. Grand Admiral Thrawn's fleet was still stationed over the planet of Earth, and Thrawn himself was spending the duration of his stay inside of the capital at Zenzao. He had visited several times before on many occasions, sometimes to meet with the Council of Earth and other times to inspect the troops coming out of the Zenzao academies, especially considering the academies based in Zenzao were now considered the best in the galaxy. Though Thrawn wasn't very noticeable, he was put up inside of a luxurious hotel and wasn't seen after he went in. He spent most of his time inside of the residence meditating and sleeping. The Jade Insurgency took a toll on him. He was no longer a younger man, and he too was trying to get to the bottom of why or how a rebellion from within the Empire ranks could so quickly turn against the Empire itself, especially someone as close to the Emperor as Mara Jade was. Thrawn didn't consider this questioning his loyalty to the Emperor. More so, he was trying to understand it, because it didn't make sense. Neither did Mara's strategy. Well, in a way it made sense, because she targeted the drive yards, but she had visited Earth before. She knew how capable the planet was of defending its orbital self. Maybe she wasn't paying attention and she was too hungry going after a big fish when she could have seared a planet like Naboo or Bothawai. It was something Thrawn didn't really understand, but he stayed quiet, keeping his fleet stationed over Earth as a precaution ordered by the Emperor, to both keep the planet safe and help pick up the pieces. The population of Earth wasn't exactly divided, but talk of a new galactic leader was certainly present on the street level and even within the Imperial Academy of Zenzal. While the Imperials studying at the Academy were meant to be loyal to the Emperor, the entire ordeal was off-putting to them. On another note, the Council of Earth was beginning to take more focus into the Outer Rim. This was because of the failures of the core worlds to uphold their part of the bargain when it came to providing to Outer Rim worlds. Tatooine was built up almost essentially overnight, and most of the other planets in the Outer Rim were basically vacated, and Tatooine was becoming overpopulated because it was a tropical paradise now. The Council of Earth knew that something needed to be changed, or else they could be in serious trouble with Tatooine getting overly populated and having a macroeconomic issue. So the Council of Earth reached out to the Emperor's office on Coruscant requesting to take full control over the rest of the Outer Rim worlds. They suggested it because it would be something to save Tatooine from going under, especially since the Empire wasn't doing anything to help with that. So within a number of weeks, they were approved to take control over the majority of the Outer Rim's funding and reconstruction. The Council of Earth was originally happy about this, but it very quickly became an economic issue. Not for Earth, because all of the banks in charge of running Earth were fairly well established and put together, but the issue was that Earth got a hold of so many credits that it couldn't delegate them fairly. Because all the central funding from core worlds such as Alderaan and Corellia that had a stake in the Outer Rim was directed to send their funds directly towards Earth so that Earth could complete the job that they couldn't. The Council of Earth wanted to ensure that they didn't get greedy with it. The truth is, even if the politicians had an interest in stealing the money, there was so much money that they wouldn't even know what to do with it. Plus, the Council's payroll got extended drastically because now they had to delegate officials from districts and cities to entire planets. While Earth was well put together, they had to make sure they didn't destroy their entire economic system to take care of the Outer Rim. The Copernican System was well taken care of, especially because they had the drive yards and full support of the Empire behind them. But to become the governorship of the entire Outer Rim was actually insanity. The people of Earth didn't actually know about the Council's dealings until months afterwards, and there was a generalized fear and outrage from the population. The people always had a decent way of formulating their own opinions and getting their point across to the Council, but this time it was very evident that the Council may have gone too far. The people were fine with taking care of Tatooine, because every citizen from Earth had free access to travel to Tatooine. This was different. It was an entire sector of the galactic map. The people were even more ready to distinguish the Emperor and the Empire unable and unfit to serve the galaxy, because it seemed as if Earth had to be the one to do it. This was far from true, but in the eyes of the population, they were afraid that they were being used to do a job that someone else didn't want. Though there was a genuine benefit to this line of work for the population, the people of Earth would still have the ability to travel freely to any other planet in the Outer Rim, including the tropical destination that was Tatooine. So more or less, the people of Earth, after getting over their outrage, supported it, because it only meant the luxury the Copernican system was used to would only be amplified, as long as it was done correctly. On the other side of the galaxy, Emperor Palpatine had a real reason for giving so much power to the Council of Earth. He felt a darkness that he hadn't ever felt before, rising in the galaxy. The presence felt like the galaxy worth of power coming from the far reaches of space towards his galaxy, and he was honestly afraid. Palpatine may have done everything in his power to stay in power for half a century, but the truth is, nothing scared him like this tremor he felt through the Force. It sent chills down his back and it put nightmares into his mind every night. Every night he could see everything, a menace of great power with so many loyalists crossing the galaxy and leaving it in ruin. While yes, Sidious was a Sith Lord, and all he wanted was carnage, he stopped those ways of the Sith because he achieved what no Sith in the galaxy was able to do. Of course, Palpatine had no issue with glassing Mandalore and any other rebellious system in his free time, but it wasn't a weekly activity. It was rare, very rare, and the few planets that stood up to the Empire were silenced so quickly he never got the chance to relish in their suffering. But Sidious was more interested in managing the longevity of his reign, especially since at the moment he had no pupil. Though Palpatine wasn't exactly enchanted with the idea of having a pupil and the idea of doing something he hadn't done in nearly a century, it crossed his mind. Palpatine could influence the Force and the midichlorians to create life. Palpatine had so many years since the death of Plagueis to come up with a way to do it by himself, and he hadn't really thought about doing it until the betrayal of Mara Jade, considering he believed that she would be the rightful successor to his empire. So, what if the rightful successor of his empire was his creation? Of course, a vessel created through the Force, just like that of Anakin Skywalker. Though Palpatine this time around knew how to concentrate the life to where and when he wanted it, so it wouldn't be some wild chase across the galaxy to find and discover the child if need be. Though it wasn't exactly at the forefront of his mind, he spent time inside of his throne room developing the life that he would create, but his focus was gone. Because his presence entering the galaxy, it took his mind away from everything. The presence crossed his mind and made his head ache so badly. The only way Palpatine was able to escape it was through the world between worlds, though Palpatine didn't really want to mess with the world between worlds because he was afraid that he would mess up his perfect little galaxy. So Palpatine, using the Force, would spend time and choose a random donor out of one of the maids that worked inside of his palace, and she would become the giver of life to the son or daughter of Palpatine. Of course, thanks to the power of the Force. On Earth, the Council was dividing its budget and trying to figure out how it would combat the other issues in the Outer Rim. There was an issue facing the Council of Earth, because as their bank accounts began to fill up, there was a massive fear of their markets exploding because of inflation. The value of the galactic credit on Earth would become so invaluable because of how many credits were circulating around, and so similarly to how it was done before, the Council sent out recruits to the Outer Rim inside of newly constructed vessels to oversee each of the projects, all of these recruits coming from the Imperial Academy at Zenzal. On another note, all the people who lost their money gambling on Tatooine would be hired for cheap work and sent across the Outer Rim to work on infrastructure projects. On another note, the Outer Rim budget would be directed a little towards the reconstruction of the Supremacy, which had finally docked at the Saturn drive yards after months of it slowly propelling its way from Earth to Saturn. Only 2 of the engines on the entire engine block were functional, and the ship was too critically damaged to jump to light speed, so it had to inch its way forward towards the drive yards at Saturn. While spending all these credits was positive, there was still an issue, and the issue was how little the budget was decreasing. They had so many credits that they needed to spend them as fast as they could, and Earth was much too luxurious to take in the amount of credits sitting inside the Copernican Reserve. The Council also knew they couldn't just throw the money at the broadside of a star cruiser because the money would just be wasted. Because if they spent all their money on infrastructure in Nal Hutta, then they would lose valuable money needed to construct spaceports and air conditioning systems for Ryloth. The trouble for the Council was helping each of these star systems with a feasible way to build their economy without the Copernican system. Had this been done by a galaxy-wide Senate, it would have been much easier and much more useful. The Council began to really have an issue with Palpatine because they were doing what he and his advisors should have been doing. It troubled them a lot, especially with the stress of inflation on their minds, because if the galactic credit became too invaluable on Earth, their millennia-old system would crumble instantly. Earth never had an issue with inflation because of how its system was built off the galactic-wide funding coming in from the Republic, though a singular planet funding an entire sector of the galactic map was unheard of. Earth was in a make-or-break phase, and right now it wasn't looking positive. The Council began constructing new programs simply to waste credits. For example, out of nowhere came the Ryloth Ocean Association, something that doesn't work too well for a planet with no oceans. Or, for another example, the Genoshan Mining Covenant. Why was it called a covenant? Because they ran out of names and they needed something to throw money at. And Why was it a mining operation on Geonosis? Well, hopefully because it would become sustainable for future Geonosian economy. Though through all of the work that Earth was doing, they began to uncover certain issues that they didn't support the Empire doing. Like when a protocol droid revealed that the Empire had genocided the entire population of Geonosis at one point or another. The deep, dirty secrets of the Empire were becoming unveiled to the Council of Earth, and they weren't exactly fond of that happening. This also led Earth to Mandalore, where a young Mandalorian man by the name of Din Djarin sat atop a throne of ashes. He held a magic sword that the former warrior society worshipped or whatever, and the people of Earth discovered the downfall of a once prideful civilization. While Din had been the leader for nearly a decade, his people were still struggling, due to a multitude of attempts to steal his magic sword. The Council of Earth took it upon themselves to throw money at Mandalore. Why? Because why not? While the Council began to doubt who their beloved Emperor was, he was on a mission of his own. He'd begun the creation of his first life since Anakin, and was now inside of his shuttle heading towards the main fleet stationed over Coruscant. In that fleet he would enter a ship called the Eclipse. It was a powerhouse ship modeled after the Death Star with a super laser that too could rip through planets and through ships. Palpatine wanted this because the Death Star sat quietly over Scarif and was silently stationed and maintained until it was genuinely needed. And while one could profess its need during the Jade Insurgency, the Death Star was far too slow to make it from Scarif to Earth to defend the planet from the Supremacy. Everything worked out anyways, so it was no harm, no foul. Palpatine, on the other hand, deployed the main defense fleet from Coruscant out to the far reaches of space towards the Kessel Run. This was a 20-parsec hyperspace route near the Arkandes Maelstrom, and Palpatine was feeling called to go there, and so the fleet was deployed from its comfortable location over Coruscant towards Kessel. Palpatine explicitly mentioned that he didn't want to enter the hyperspace route or the Maelstrom. He just wanted to be close to it because he had visions of it. Of course, he told the crew that it was a routine expedition. While they really had no clue what that meant, they just accepted it because he was the Emperor. The Emperor's fleet was comprised of 10 Resurgent-class Star Destroyers, 15 Imperial 2-star destroyers, the Eclipse, numerous support vessels, and 2 supporting Dominator-class Star Destroyers, which housed a number of support vessels including hundreds of wings of TIE Defenders, translating into thousands upon thousands of TIE Defenders. The Emperor's fleet was stacked, and it was the exact reason that the Jade Insurgency avoided coming to Coruscant like it was the plague. Admiral Thrawn was with his fleet as well, commanding the Chimera as he always did. Though the Chimera had seen many upgrades, many of which came after the victory over Earth while Thrawn was stationed there. Regardless, the fleet arrived at a hyperspace. Everything was silent. Of course it was space. Palpatine was sleeping and he was jolted from his slumber like he had never had been before, and he moved from his bed like a man possessed by fear. He'd never felt this in his life and he knew what it was. The worst force the galaxy could ever come across that wasn't him. The stakes were the highest they'd ever been, and Palpatine needed his men to be at their best. Palpatine made his way to the bridge and ordered the Admiral to have every weapon on every vessel ready, to have every pilot on every ship ready. The Admiral was confused, but he was better than to question the judgment of the Emperor. When the Admiral was just a boy, Palpatine had just become Chancellor, and it was so thrilling for him to be standing beside him as a grown man, serving the greatest leader in the history of the galaxy. The Admiral called out an order to everyone across the deck, and then signaled to the other vessels in the fleet to get ready. Grand Admiral Thrawn, who technically outranked the Admiral on the Eclipse, took the order in and relayed the order elsewhere. The Admiral on the Eclipse was ranked higher than Thrawn only because the Emperor was on his vessel giving out the orders, though Thrawn had complete strategic control over the entire operation. Regardless, waves upon waves of TIE Defenders started up their engines and powered on their heavy weapons. Everything stayed silent. Palpatine stood at the edge of the bridge with his eyes closed, hearing the sounds of something so large. Moments later, Palpatine's eyes shot open to the sight of not a fleet, but the legendary beast known to many as the Mother, but to others who know of her legend, Abeloth, the Chaos Bringer. Palpatine screamed out in terror, demanding everything fire on her immediately. The entire Coruscant defense fleet fired on Abeloth, and within minutes, she vanished. The Admiral ordered the fleet to stop firing, feeling a sense of relief that the terrible beast had vanished. Half a second later, that relief passed through his body as he watched one of the Imperial 2-star destroyers explode from the inside out. Men, debris, and vessels were thrown from the ship in a multitude of directions. Thrawn stood on his bridge, and a chill ran down his spine as he locked eyes with Abeloth. Her glare stopped him in his tracks. Thrawn had never been so scared in his life until he met her stare. The two of them locked eyes as she vanished again, and another Star Destroyer ripped apart. The Admiral of the Eclipse asked Palpatine for orders as the Sith Lord stumbled over his words. He turned back and demanded that the fleet split up and fire on her. The Admiral called out the order across all ships, as Grand Admiral Thrawn fell to his knees, his eyes motionless and his skin stone cold. The captain on deck ordered the ship around, as she ordered for medical assistance to be brought to Thrawn. The captain on deck saw this as her moment for a promotion, but she watched as the Star Destroyer on her port side rip apart, and the captain from the ship's body slam across the glass of the Star Destroyer's bridge. The fleet dispersed as vessels tried to get a clear shot on Abeloth, but she was too quick to disappear as well. Another Star Destroyer and then a Resurgence class ripped apart from the inside out. Terror could be felt at the heart and souls of the people inside of every single vessel, and instead of feeding off of it, Palpatine was limited by it, because he too was in fear for his life. The Admiral of the Eclipse suggested to the Emperor that they divide their forces and retreat immediately, until Imperial intelligence could come up with a solution. Palpatine nodded his head, and the fleet dispersed into any direction to escape Abeloth as they could. As the ships escaped, Abeloth revealed herself and focused in on Palpatine's spirit and locked onto him. She knew that he was the biggest threat in the galaxy to her rule, and so she would follow him through space until she could kill him herself, though she would rampage everything she came across until she got to him. Palpatine ended up taking the hyperspace route from Kessel that passed through Kamino to Tatooine, and then from Tatooine past a number of planets to Earth. He believed with the supremacy present on Earth, it would be the safest location to be. He also ordered the admiral of his fleet to dispatch the Death Star to the Copernican System to be used as a defense station in any case they were followed. Palpatine, knowing Abeloth locked onto him, would have to lure her into this trap. Over the period of a couple weeks, the planets in the way of Abeloth would suffer. The powerful Outer Rim world of Tatooine would crumble. With less than 20 years in the spotlight as a tropical destination in the Outer Rim, it returned to desolation within 24 hours. Many other planets were also ripped apart and filled with the dead of billions. The sight was horrific, and it plagued the galaxy as news spread like wildfire. Though the scariest thing was that no one knew what was happening. On Earth, they watched their pride of the Outer Rim shatter into shambles and be ripped apart by a goth girl with an ego problem. Palpatine and his defense fleet had been stationed outside of Earth for a good week and a half, with the Death Star eventually present. Of course, with the local crumbling of planets across the Outer Rim, and now the Mid-Rim, Earth's market was crashing and the economy was almost in shambles, as people buckled down for the worst. Though there was something very odd to the people of Earth. While yes, Palpatine had the supremacy and the Eclipse stationed outside of Earth, just a little beyond the gravitational pull of the planet was a moon-sized object. A representative from the Council of Earth investigated it to find out that the Empire had constructed a super weapon powerful enough to destroy an entire planet. This immediately caused issues with the Council of Earth. They didn't realize that their resources from the Saturn drive yards had gone to such a vile weapon. No news of this had broke out across the planet. The people were very aware that the Emperor was stationed on the planet, though. Grand Admiral Thrawn took over control of the Supremacy and the entire fleet after rerouting the majority of the fleet to Coruscant and taking himself to Earth to defend the Emperor. Palpatine was stationed in the capital at Zhenzhou, close to an Imperial Academy, the same place the Council usually put Palpatine when he visited. Though Palpatine could feel Abeloth and feel that she was close, she may have actually been. And then a news feed popped up over his communicator. It was Abeloth. She had struck in Thebes. She had disappeared under the surface of the planet after leveling the entire city. Palpatine growled as he stormed out of the room, instructing everyone to move their forces to the city mentioned on the news. Palpatine requested to have a vessel then take him to the grand city of Giza. The man questioned why Palpatine wanted to go there, but Palpatine shushed him and made his way for the vessel. At Thebes, elite units of Imperial stormtroopers, called Death Troopers, made their way around the wreckage. Earth's elite defense forces prepared their entire lives for this, and they scavenged the ruins of Thebes, looking for Abeloth. She had torn the entire ancient city apart, killing 3.5 million people, travelers, and outsiders who called one of the original capitals of Earth home. 3,000 years of history vanished because Abeloth, and for all of the Imperial Defense Force, especially those from Earth, this was personal. As they stepped over bodies in the decay of city structures that had been torn apart just moments before, they crawled down into a cavern made below the city. The cavern seemed as if it could go on forever. The stormtroopers were searching and searching with no ability to find the beast. At Giza, Palpatine's shuttle landed after only a short trip from Zhenzhou. Palpatine exited the ship and walked away from the main city through the desert. He could feel Abeloth coming towards his location. The people of Earth were fortunate that the Jedi had once called this planet home. When they were forced to call this place home long ago, they left artifacts. When the Republic returned, so did the Jedi, and they left a gift here in Giza for the people of Earth, and Palpatine was going to use that gift to defeat this terrible monster. Palpatine stepped forward and looked at the Sphinx, and before his eyes the ancient statue was ripped apart as Palpatine fell to his back. TIE defenders stationed in Giza lifted off into the air as they sped towards the Sphinx, which was now ripped in half. Palpatine got back to his feet as TIE defenders rained in from the skies, being ripped apart as they got close to Abeloth. Palpatine closed his eyes and ignited the force from the three pyramids, and they began to slowly crack open. Abeloth turned around and noticed it as she spun back towards Sidious, shooting electricity with the heat of 1,000 suns towards the ancient Sith Lord. Palpatine gasped as he opened his eyes, realizing he should have just used the Death Star to blow up Earth, but before the lightning could reach him, he saw Abeloth scream. Her cry was audible to the entire planet as she was sucked back in towards the Great Pyramids of Giza. Palpatine was holding out his hand to defend himself from the electricity, but it shot back into Abeloth's face as she was drawn into a container met in the middle of the three Great Pyramids. Sidious looked over and looked down to see a small container with the logo of the Jedi on it. Under the logo was a saying in the ancient dialect of the Jedi, "The Force I am with me is the Force." Palpatine grabbed the chamber with the Force and pulled it into his hands. It was a small, ancient Egyptian vase, and it was elegantly sculpted with the beauty of an ancient Earth civilization and that of the Jedi. Palpatine took the container so that Abeloth could never escape. While the carnage had been stopped and peace had returned to the galaxy, there was a larger issue for Palpatine. One of the leading representatives of power in the galaxy had an issue with the recently discovered Death Star, the weapon that went against everything the Council of Earth stood for. Though there was a bright side to both ends of the spectrum. For the people of Earth, they would have to decide if they wanted to participate in the grander empire, but on another note, they finally had a place to put all their money. It wasn't really actually that positive, but it would keep their economy from becoming inflated. When Palpatine returned to Zhenzhou, there were celebrations in the street. People were so happy that the power of Abeloth came to an end at the planet of Earth. And of course they were able to survive not just Abeloth but the Jade Insurgency within the span of a couple of months. The pride of Earth was now the pride of the Empire, as the Empire began to rejoice over the second major victory on Earth within the same period of time. And while Palpatine was responsible for this victory, his leadership was now in question, because when he returned to Zhenzhou alongside the cheers and excitement of triumph was the questions of loyalty, especially coming from a council of leaders who had just maintained higher stress levels than anyone else of the entire Empire since the Clone Wars. While victory was fine and all and even exciting, the people of Earth had an issue with the yellow brick road that led from Kessel to Earth, trailing Palpatine and Abeloth back home, and the construction of a super weapon no one knew was created until now. Palpatine could feel the changing tides. The question remained, would Earth become a new rebellion in the face of Abeloth, or would the greater Empire itself become disbanded into two different sections like the Republic had before the Clone Wars? Surely it could happen. The Copernican System guarded the greater power and support of the galaxy. Our story picks up amongst the celebrations in the streets of Zhenzhou. There was a celebration across the city. They survived Abeloth, and while there was victory, there was the onset of something else. The Council of Earth sat quietly inside their council chambers, looking over the first reports from every planet from Kessel to Earth. Every planet was destroyed, trillions were dead, and planets were entirely ripped apart by Abeloth herself. The council sat in solemn thought. They all discussed quietly. The sound of fireworks ricocheted off the walls of the city, and the celebration went into high gear. The council admitted that they believed it were time for a galaxy-wide change. There was an issue, and the issue sat at the middle of the galaxy. It came from the Emperor. and while his run was good, the government of the galaxy needed to be more central, especially since the Copernican System was currently taking care of the entire Outer Rim, which currently needed the assistance of the entire Empire. The Council of Earth looked at their data, and they knew that a simple transfer of power wouldn't be in. The reason being is that the people of the core were strictly loyal to Palpatine, so the people of Earth would have to suggest that Palpatine step down from his throne. Palpatine was inside of his penthouse apartment he was gifted when he came to Earth. It was a private residence that looked over the Imperial District of Zenzao, while also having a luxurious look at the rest of the city and the landscape that surrounded it. Palpatine was feeling into the Force. He kept the vase with him, as a means to get rid of Abeloth that was held inside of it. Palpatine felt into the Force and realized that he had previously felt wasn't Abeloth. It was something else, and Abeloth was currently just masking the presence of what was to come. Because what was creeping across the galaxy was something that could be much worse, of an issue for the Empire than that of Abeloth. While the galaxy needed Palpatine to save them from Abeloth, Palpatine couldn't stand in the way of the true power that crept across the galaxy. Palpatine also knew that members of the Council of Earth would likely suggest to him to step down from his power threshold on the galaxy. He knew that to do this would allow him the ability to take the vase containing Abeloth and rid her of existence, while allowing the remainder of the Empire deal with this threat. In other words, it would make the galaxy look weak without him, and so they would have no other choice but to request in return to be their true leader when they faced this new power coming across the galaxy. Palpatine knew that the Council of Earth was in talks, and so he showed up to meet with them and informed them that the reign of the Empire was going to be handed back over to the galaxy. Believing that at this point in time he needed to step away from the politics of the galaxy. The Council was absolutely shocked to hear this, but it made their job even easier. They no longer had to worry about accidentally creating a civil war with the rest of the galaxy, especially the core. Palpatine informed them that he would have his office on Coruscant handle the entire thing for them. They would begin to receive support from Coruscant, and the holdings that they were given from the core worlds would be split up and budgeted for them to assist them with the rebuilding of the Outer Rim. The Council listened to make sure that there weren't any terms of which Palpatine could do anything to take back his power. Palpatine, having been the leader of the Empire and the Republic for half a century, was too brilliant at playing the political game. He was older than most of the people inside of the council chambers, and so he got his point across without having to make up any lies. Everything he told the council was true. The only difference was when he got to Coruscant, the contract would be written up in the best way he legally could to ensure that his reconquering of the Empire would be as flawless as possible. There would be no need to worry about any fighting over territory or trying to get the Empire to side with him on anything. All he would have to do is return from his vacation and take down the Empire that grew in his absence. Of course, this was something that the people of the Empire wouldn't learn about until it was much too late. Same as it was with the Old Republic. On a side note, Palpatine had a much more important thing to worry about, like the maid who was about to bear his ungodly creation, the Force. The epitome of what would become the true evil successor to his reign. Whether it be a son or a daughter, Palpatine did not know, nor did he care. He did know that he was going to allow the galaxy to suffer without him, so that they would realize the importance of loyalty to his bloodline. Palpatine departed from Earth, leaving the entire council in a state of shock as they all looked over and watched the Emperor depart from the room. The Council of Earth then realized that they would have to begin delegating power, considering a majority of the Imperial fleet was stationed over Earth, and they had trillions of credits that were meant for spending in the Outer Rim. Palpatine eventually departed Earth, and so the Council decided it was time to start moving their resources. Palpatine didn't leave with the majority of his fleet, nor did he leave with his flagship. He took a regular Imperials II Star Destroyer back to Coruscant. Palpatine would use the power of legalese to delicately move all of his power that he needed into positions of leverage for him so that when he needed it, he could use it. Palpatine never wanted to be obvious about his plans, and so his plans were formulated in the wording of an entire legal document that would be left behind for the Empire. Palpatine correctly assumed that the Empire would have a lot of infighting in his absence, especially due to the power that the core believed they deserved. The truth is, Palpatine knew that hyping up the Copernican System would allow them to feel the confidence to rightly take on the core worlds. Palpatine also strategically left a majority of the Imperial fleet behind so that the core would feel threatened by the Copernican System, all of which that large fleet being stationed over Earth. After everything was signed over by his office, Palpatine would take the maid from his throne and disappear into space towards an ancient homeworld of the Sith called Exegol. On the planet of Exegol, Palpatine would have his very own daughter, a being created of the Force, much like Anakin Skywalker. She would be named Rey Palpatine, and she would be the heir to his evil throne. While Palpatine certainly didn't want to raise a child, it would be easier of a task for him to do than what he left behind for the Empire to take on. On another note, Palpatine would begin working to drain the life of Abeloth out of the Viz and terminate her existence for eternity. This was the main project of Palpatine to work on until he felt the time was right to return to his galaxy. On Earth, the Copernican System took its foot and slammed it down into the political atmosphere of the Empire. While they didn't suggest that they were going to be leading the Empire, they did on the other hand suggest a plan of action to deal with the absence of the Emperor. Earth was already weeks ahead of the rest of the Empire because of their knowledge of Palpatine taking a step down from his power. Truthfully, the Copernican System thought it to be best to keep the entire Imperial fleet present over Earth, but they also decided that for the betterment of the galaxy, to dispatch the fleet into the Outer Rim to serve as a relief effort to the people that suffered. While the people of Earth, after celebration, would have to pick up the mess left behind at Thebes after Abeloth's showing, they would get to work on other parts across the galaxy. The Council began to delineate its credits to each respective world across the Outer Rim, as they began to work on projects that would help the Empire restore itself. They had no knowledge of what Palpatine was running from, and the truth is, Palpatine had no knowledge when it would be here. He just assumed it would be here because of how powerful the Essence was, even after the death of Abeloth. But the truth is, he was completely off of his prediction. The Council of Earth began to receive harsh ridicule from the people of the core. The Copernican System didn't take any credits from the Imperial Reserve, rather they were just doing what was best for the people of the Outer Rim with the credits they received from the core earlier that year. The Council knew that the representative planets in the inner core would take it personally that Earth wasn't spending money on what they wanted them to spend it on, though the truth is the money did belong to Earth. All the money that Earth used was for the greater good of the Empire, not for the greater good of Earth. While there was certainly a large issue present on Tatooine and across the other worlds scattered across the Outer Rim, the Council had faith that they could pick up the pieces. The largest issue was the fact that there were so many dead because of Abeloth. On Tatooine, there was only a few thousand survivors, one tribe of Tuskens that hadn't been wiped off the galactic map, and half a tribe of Jawas. The planet was in absolute turmoil. Almost all the work that had been done in the past 20 years vanished, though there was benefits to it. The ocean still remained, and while most of the structures were destroyed, there was still a chance to rekindle what had been lost. The same could be said for all the damaged planets, all across the pathway to Earth. The people of Earth saw this as a chance to rebuild an already depleted Outer Rim. It would force the Empire's hand into going into the Outer Rim and cleaning up the mess. While it would have been nice to stop Abeloth before she ripped half the galaxy apart, the Council was happy that they could still positively affect the galaxy. Though the galactic map was turning into a political drama, Corellia had led a coalition of core worlds that wanted to return power to the center of the galaxy. The Copernican System was confused by the heavy-hearted response made by the core worlds. While yes, they certainly expected this type of response from the core worlds, they didn't have a good way to quiet down the heaviness and anger coming from those core worlds. The truth is, the core was threatened, and they were trying to assert dominance without the help of Palpatine, something that wouldn't really work, because Coruscant was trying to return to power itself, due to its location at the center of galaxy. Again, Earth was simply attempting to help the bereft worlds across the Outer Rim, and while the core tried to bargain for their credits back, they came to find out that the Council of Earth found a means to spend almost all the credits they had received for the Outer Rim Fund. All those said credits were spent inside of the Outer Rim, exclusively, aside from the credits used to rebuild the Supremacy. The Council of Earth dispatched the majority of the Imperial forces out into the Outer Rim, informing Thrawn that in the power vacuum, without the Emperor, the Outer Rim would likely be the place where most rebellions, pirates, or scoundrels would surface. His job was to provide relief and to take out any insurgents. Thrawn was perfectly fine with this, because working with the Copernican System with him was always a joy. He still believed there was a sole reason for the victory of the Empire over Scarif, and especially due to the fact that they were the ones that constructed the TIE Defenders. Though currently the Saturn drive yards were pumping out medical cruisers and relief cruisers, the Copernican System was doing everything in its power, especially as the rest of Imperial control opened up to them, to help the people of the galaxy. Not only did they realize Palpatine did some shady things behind their backs, he did shady things in front of them and passed it off as normalcy, such as the enslavement of the Wookiees and their usage as slaves. There were many cases of this throughout the entire galaxy, and the Copernican system wouldn't stand for it. As the Council understood, it was the Jedi that helped the Copernican system move past slavery nearly 3,000 years beforehand, and they wouldn't stand for such barbaric traits within the Empire. The truth is, Earth was operating without much consent from the core. Earth took control of an empty mantle and began working exclusively with Palpatine's administration that was still stationed on Coruscant. And because the core worlds were so focused on what Earth was doing, they didn't realize that a majority of the power in the galaxy still sat in Coruscant. Regardless, the Council of Earth decided to move the Death Star back to Scarif, and to take the 1.5 million employees stationed on the Death Star and move them towards relief efforts across the galaxy. There were still about 200,000 employees still present on the Death Star to keep up the basic maintenance of the space station, but the Council believed a majority of the population would be better suited elsewhere in the galaxy, and they were correct about that as well. The Copernican system even began to promise some of its own resources to planets with enslaved populations. Realizing the travesties of the Empire was truly horrific for the Council, and they truly believed that reparations should be paid out to the people who suffered because of the Empire, and so they promised the Wookiees, for example, a new construction on their home world and the promise of security from the Trandoshians as they put a small blockade of Imperial defense cruisers outside of Kashyyyk to defend the Wookiees from their lizard hunters. As Earth began creating a foothold in galactic power, planets from around the core, mid-rim, and outer rim would rally beside the Copernican system, not as a system of loyalty, but more so as a system of governance that wouldn't just be housed inside of one planet. The people believed that they could help the galaxy out if they all came together. This coalition became known as the Copernican Coalition, and the people of Earth rallied behind it. The only issue with this is that there was an issue with that seen from within the core. The issue being that the core didn't feel in control, almost as if Palpatine made them treat him with the utmost loyalty just for him to favor Earth. It was unfair and it was blasphemous. The core was certainly a product of their luxury, and the fact that others could achieve that same luxury intimidated them. While yes, the core had the Kuat drive yards, it didn't measure up to what the Saturn drive yards could accomplish. And while yes, the core had their own academies, they didn't measure up to what the Academy of Zhenzhou could accomplish. And while yes, the core had its own military that was outfitted by the Empire, it still didn't match up to the combined power of a leader in Thrawn, the Eclipse, the Supremacy, and the little moon-shaped space station called the Death Star. Though Earth wasn't one to show off its firepower, they had no reason to, because to the Council, they weren't competing with the core, they were working to establish a better galaxy. The people of Earth believed that they would be best served if they worked together in unison with the rest of the galaxy, because working with the rest of the galaxy would help guide a sustainable future. The truth is, the first couple months after Palpatine departed the galaxy began to find unison. It wasn't quick or even immediate, it was simply the beginning of a new resolve towards peace. While yes, the Copernican system was leading the way there, it was a combined effort coming from a multitude of planets across the galaxy. They all worked in unison to get rid of labor camps and slavery, corrupt establishments were reduced to useless power, and the Empire focused on rebuilding itself in the Outer Rim. Over the few months, the Saturn drive yards were able to establish a foothold of relief in the Outer Rim. While the damage that was done to the Outer Rim would leave generational damage to the people of the galaxy, it would also be up to the combined minds of the Empire to find a way to overcome that and help make the galaxy a better place. The span of a few months saw real damage. The relief effort in the Outer Rim was quadruple what it had ever been, which meant that everything on each and every planet that was needed was reconstructed. While the entire population of planets like Tatooine had just about vanished, the Empire was making sure that as the population returned, there would be a sound place to call home for those that grew up there. The growth across the Empire would be astounding. While it would of course take time for the core worlds to rekindle a relationship with the rest of the Empire, it would allow the bond to grow extraordinarily. Because the issue wasn't coming from the people of the core, the issue was coming from each core's world's individual government. When the time came, the core would unite its governmental forces together to assist the greater Empire. When this happened, and only when this happened, did Earth suggest to reconstruct an Imperial Senate, without a monarch, and tear down the former office of the Emperor while establishing a new order of government. While the government of Earth didn't inform the people of Earth about the Emperor, they made sure that they took precautionary measures to ensure that there could be never a singular monarch in the galaxy. The Copernican system saw the atrocities committed by the Empire and believed that there were absolutely no reason to allow that type of behavior to exist in the galaxy. The Council of Earth would lead this reconstruction of the new Senate building on Coruscant, along with corresponding Senate buildings across every single collaborative planet in the Empire, meaning that every planet with a senator would have a place to bring the government of the Empire. The reason this was suggested was so that every individual within the Empire could feel as if their voice was genuinely heard by the Senate of the Empire. When the Empire came to visit each Senate building across the galaxy, they'd be forced to see what was happening in that sector of the galaxy, on those planets, and in that system, and whether or not the senator of that particular system was playing a political soap opera or genuinely trying to ask for assistance. This would also tighten the bond between worlds in the core and in the Outer Rim, especially. Palpatine, who was still an Exegol, hadn't foreseen such a collaborative work between the Imperial worlds, because he thought he left a big enough divide between the Midrim and the core. Not that he expected an all-out civil war, but he did expect tension until his return. Though on another note, Palpatine believed there was supposed to be an evil force entering the galaxy. But because that force didn't make itself present, there was no conflict and absolute union. Though there was one struggle for the Empire, and that was a decision to demilitarize. The Copernican System didn't stand by the side of demilitarization because they made a lot of their credits off of the drive yards, and there was always the fear of those that could do them harm. The Empire itself had a solid year and a half since Palpatine's departure, but the conflicts of politics erupted in the Senate of the Galactic Empire. And while debate was positive, the larger issues present to the greater Empire were their struggles of the Outer Rim. Though Earth had seemingly begun the project by throwing trillions upon trillions of credits at each respective planet, more needed to be done. The Empire needed to deposit itself within the Outer Rim and establish itself as a head honcho in the galaxy out there. There were still several issues in the Outer Rim, but with the established military presence in the Outer Rim, there was an increasing decline of these groups of insurgents. The Copernican System sent its best contractors to the Outer Rim to set up everything that was needed for each respective system. For the longer part of 19 or more years, the galaxy would find the greatest unison that it had seen since the time of the High Republic. While there were no Jedi left in the galaxy, it also felt like there were no Sith left in the galaxy. Palpatine was the one who was the most disappointed with all this. He threw away all the power in the galaxy because he felt a disturbance in the Force. He felt like a true fool. And the issue was, he knew he couldn't just come out of the shadows because the Empire had no real reason to target each other. They had completely united. There were also only a few people who served within the Empire who actually missed Palpatine, though most of the individuals that missed Palpatine were military personnel. The most prominent of these was General Pryde, who had served valiantly with the Empire for Palpatine's main fleet during their dealings with Abeloth. He ascended the ranks and kept a spot on the Imperial hierarchy because he was good enough to be there. Though Pryde found it disingenuous to serve the scum of the Outer Rim, he had an old galaxy perspective of the Outer Rim. He was an old-fashioned Imperial. He wasn't bred out of the Copernican System. He was created within the core on Coruscant. There was a severe difference between the academies in the core and the ones in Zhenzhou during Palpatine's reign. The ones inside of the core focused on oppression and servitude to the Empire, while the ones in Zhenzhou focused on the power of a united front. This resulted really well for the Empire because most of the individuals from Zhenzhou actually progressed throughout their career without having to backstab another individual to find success. General Pryde was one of these very few members of the Core Academy to reach such a high rank within the Empire. On another note, the Empire itself was becoming better all around, as they all focused their efforts in building around the Outer Rim. It wasn't straightforward by any means, but the cities across Tatooine were rebuilt within those 20 years, and the first generation of post-Abeloth Tatooine had rose to adulthood. It was the same across all the corresponding planets from Kessel to Earth. The galaxy was finally healing. The Council of Earth was especially happy because of all their hard work in the Outer Rim beginning to pay off. Planets across the galaxy began to value the Outer Rim worlds as upper-class societies. Of course, with older generations, especially those with members still alive from the era of the Republic, they would see these planets of the Outer Rim as second-tier planets and systems with second-tier citizens. People that didn't deserve the luxury of a prideful empire. But the truth is, once those people started dying out, the newer generation was excited to explore the Outer Rim. It was an exciting place in the galaxy to go. Certainly a lot of planets became amateur central. Tatooine was a tropical destination that was more affordable for younger individuals, especially those who liked the party. The gambling ring was rebuilt on Tatooine, and the art of pod racing drew in a lot of young individuals to Tatooine for spring break and so on. A few planets in the Outer Rim had the same effect, one of them being Nal Hutta, which became more of an edgy rave location for young adults of the Empire, and of course, who could forget Kamino? That planet, after having been the birthplace of a clone army nearly 70 years beforehand, became party central. A couple kids from Anaxis, who came from powerful, rich families, accidentally went to Camino, to which they investigated it to find the ruins of Tapoca City left behind. They decided to bug their parents for a small loan of a couple billion credits, and they built a facility on Camino that sat above the water. It became really special as a place for kids to go party. This then turned into a resort of sorts, as they built a water world full of wave pools, slides, and just about any attraction that dragged any young adult from across the galaxy to Camino to party. As the saying goes, the rich stay rich. Because the kids made back quadruple their investment. They were able to buy off a small loan that they got from their parents, and they made enough money to buy out entire city blocks on Coruscant and become landlords for one of the most expensive planets in the entire galaxy. Their families were built on the wealth of the Imperial War Machine. One of the kids' last names was Gent, to which the resurgent class Star Destroyer was named after their family. The price of being an arms dealer, isn't it? Regardless of the party palaces across the Outer Rim, there was really defined lines for people of the galaxy. The Mid-Rim became known as a place of artistic individuals and families to go. The core was a place where politics, business, families, and learning transpired. And the Outer Rim was essentially a place where young adults went to familiarize themselves with fun and the excitement the galaxy had to offer. Of course, this was certainly generalizing, as each representative planet had each of the previously mentioned attractions, but for people leaving their home world for opportunities elsewhere in the galaxy, that was the main gist of why they went there. After 20 years of peace, the Council of Earth finally began to slowly shut down its massive war machine. Not that they cut off the Saturn drive yards, because they could still produce vessels, but more so they shut down the war machine of the Empire. It was actually Earth that led this regime towards demilitarization. While originally they were against the idea of it, a new administration entered the Council of Earth and helped bring a new unseen level of success to the galaxy, which in turn ended up to resulting back to the lack of a need for a strong military. The big thing was that the military would still exist. The academy at Zhenzhou would still remain, but they wanted to focus more of their annual budget towards more important programs. This went into expansion on Tatooine, as the Copernican System still had a direct tie to the planet. Tatooine was a spring break destination for the people of Earth. Of course, people from Zhenzhou could go to the Mediterranean or vice versa. The truth is, just staying on Earth was lame. People wanted to experience life under the twin suns, and I mean seriously, so many fun places to visit on Tatooine. While success seemed to be the name of the game in the Empire, especially without Palpatine, the long-foreseen trouble finally arrived in the galaxy. An entire population was forced out of their galaxy, and so they came into this galaxy to wreak havoc and take over the galaxy for themselves and re-establish what had been lost. Palpatine and his daughter Rey could feel this. The Yuzhang Vong made themselves present on the far side of the galaxy, towards the top of the galactic map, when they came in and smashed into Molinist. Instead of being a total wipeout like it was with Abeloth, there was a fighting chance, but that fighting chance began to diminish as millions upon millions of Vong entered Molinist, fighting the planetary defense. The Empire was immediately alerted by this, and they sent a fleet to assist the people of Molinist. The Senate of the Empire alerted everyone in that quadrant of the galaxy that there was a new galactic-level threat. The Empire rallied together, the supremacy was lifted away from Obadiah and dispatched towards Molinist. They weren't really sure what was playing out across the galaxy, but they did know that the Empire was under threat. They had done so much right, and now they had to defend their honor from a real opponent. Of course, the Earth had the suppressed pirate regimes that popped up from time to time, but other than that, this was the first real threat they'd seen since Palpatine's departure. Admiral Thrawn, who was still holding control of all the Imperial forces, made a much larger push to the far side of the galaxy, though he was unsure if there would be more enemy forces elsewhere, deciding to station a weaker hand of the fleet outside of the core in the case of the enemy getting around the fleets that he sent out with a counterstrike. The Yuzhang Vong bounced off of Molinist and claimed themselves down around the system of Yavin 4. When the Empire got to the destroyed planet of Molinist, they were outraged. For most of the crew, they were either too young to remember or not even born when Abeloth tore apart the Outer Rim. Now they got to see firsthand what the previous generations had to witness. It was terrible. An entire civilization burned to the ground, and there was nothing left, and no one had survived. The Empire would have to pick up the pieces in the future, but right now they had to focus on what had done this, and how to take the fight to them. Probe droids were dispatched across the entire side of the galaxy, and yet nothing came back. Weeks would pass by without any sign of a foe that had ripped through Molinist. The Empire was on high alert, and every soul from Ilum to Tatooine had the thought of carnage on their minds. People had nowhere to flee, because there was nowhere that was safe. While yes, the Empire had an overarching control over the entire galaxy, they didn't have the manpower to effectively defend every star system in the galaxy. And while the Empire was pulling itself together, the planet of Naboo was hit and ripped apart. There was a sizable fleet over Naboo too, but the fleet size didn't matter because of the overwhelming force that the Yuzang Vong had. Naboo was wiped off the face of the galaxy, and so the only thing the Empire could do was dispatch a fleet towards Naboo to try and solve the issue. When they got there, the Yuzang Vong had vanished yet again. The Empire was concerned, though they knew that if they played their cards right, they could stand up to the might of the Yuzang Vong or whoever their foe was. It was just a matter of finding them and destroying them. Admiral Thrawn couldn't yet pick apart a pattern, and he expected to find them another couple weeks away, from a combat zone popping out and attacking again somewhere else. It was just a matter of where or when that would happen. A couple weeks down the line, Kessel would be hit and obliterated. Luckily for the Empire, Kessel was mostly a remote world that didn't utilize much. And even better, the Yuzang Vong trapped themselves on the other side of the Kessel Run and the Arcades Maelstrom. Admiral Thrawn deployed the Supremacy and a ton of other Imperial vessels to the Kessel Run to await his foe. At the same time, he moved General Pride inside of the Eclipse back to Coruscant to await further orders. Pride was perfectly fine with this. While the Empire was distracted, a force returned from the depths of Exegol. He and his daughter made their journey across the galaxy. They had become the new rulers of the galaxy. Of course, that was the plan, and Palpatine had been feeding that information to Rey her entire life. All she knew was that she had power, and because of that power, she was destined to become the Empress of the galaxy. Regardless, the Imperial fleet arrived outside the Kessel Run, and they prepared for a fight with a foe they had never seen before. This foe had ripped apart 3 different planets, and their threat was definitely noticeable. By this point, the Imperial fleet had upgraded itself, outfitted with Imperial Advanced 3 Star Destroyers, along with a Surgeon 2 class Star Destroyers. The Supremacy was an older model vessel, but the Empire didn't really have a need for a Super Dreadnought or a Mega class Dreadnought model anymore. The Supremacy was the one and only, and surrounding her were several support ships in the form of one of the Dominator-class Star Destroyers. Thrawn's flagship was still the Chimera, and she was outfitted with some of the most powerful weaponry the galaxy had ever seen. The heroes of the Empire sat themselves outside the Kessel Run for the Battle of the Ages. Thrawn positioned the fleet in every strategic placing he could just to ensure that his foe had no place to run. Thrawn's plan was to choke them out, and so when the Yuzang Vong marched out of the Kessel Run, war began. The Dominator-class Star Destroyers released several of the Mach 2 TIE Defenders, and the first fight began. Thrawn's strategy looked perfect on paper until he realized what he was up against. It was the full power of an entire other galaxy, a galaxy now destroyed. This foe was coming here to colonize their own galaxy for themselves, and to eliminate the power threat, which was the Empire. On Coruscant, the Empire itself was on the verge of crumbling. This wasn't due to some power flaw or even a gripe between senators. It was the Palpatines. They had returned to assert dominance. When Palpatine learned that one of his most loyal dogs was guarding Coruscant, he couldn't help but make his move. He knew the battle was upon the Empire, and he could just use this moment to take great advantage of the power gap in the galaxy, especially since General Pride was one of the only few ranks lower than Thrawn that had enough power to easily take control of the fleet stationed outside of Coruscant. Maybe even enough leverage to pull in others from around the core. Though the core wasn't exactly the same as it used to be, they didn't see others in the galaxies below them, and they had no issue with the outer rim or the mid-rim. So the idea of them bending at the knee upon the arrival of their former emperor was seriously out of the question. But for someone like General Pride, that wasn't an issue, and once Imperial troopers began hearing about the massacre inside the Senate building, they made their way down to save the senators, only to be confronted by the evil emperor and his daughter of doom. She carried a double-bladed lightsaber, and he used the Force to torch the people across the building, every senator becoming a victim. Sheev and Rey would kill all the opposition, using the Force as their ally to rip apart stormtroopers they had in front of them. When General Pride lowered some of his Imperial Star Destroyers to the surface of the planet to destroy the Senate building to kill whoever was the foe inside, he realized who it was, before requesting a shuttle to take him to the ground. When General Pride arrived, he stepped out of the vessel and confronted the Emperor and his daughter. Rey was bloodthirsty. After killing thousands of people who frequented the Senate building, an Imperial officer would add to the kill wish list. But her father stopped her, as he stepped forward and welcomed General Pride, as he got on his knee and bowed to the Emperor and his daughter. Palpatine told his most loyal subject that they would be taking control of the Empire once again. Pride was enthralled, realizing that as he stood next to Palpatine, he would have the most powerful position in the military, as Thrawn and Tarkin did before him. Sidious told Pride to take his daughter with him. He would be inside of his throne room awaiting for the Empire's return. Pride nodded his head and took Rey up to the Eclipse with him. Across the galaxy, Thrawn's forces were slugging it out with the most powerful opponent they'd ever faced. The Yuzang Vong was ripping apart Star Destroyers like they were support ships. This didn't mean the Yuzang Vong had the advantage, but it did mean that Thrawn had to play their game, and he prepared for it by deploying 2 reserve fleets on either side of the flanks. Where there was debris, there was now power of the Empire. If Thrawn lost here, then there was a chance that the Empire would likely not survive the Yuzang Vong, which is exactly why Palpatine chose this moment to strike. Thrawn's strategy changed as he moved all the support ships and fighters on a beeline for the middle of the Yuzang Vong fleet. He wasn't convinced it would work, because he could be sacrificing all of his smaller vessels and support ships of the fleet. If this failed, then he would subsequently lose the battle and the war. All the support ships, small and medium-sized, turned their afterburners on all the way up and flew towards the center of the fleet, as ordered by Admiral Thrawn. In the front were the TIE Defenders and their elite shields. They started a heavy bombing run into the middle of the Yuzang Vong fleet, and ships began to disintegrate before their eyes. Thrawn saw it working, and then from the right side of the flank, he brought in 3 Resurgent-class destroyers and had them open up fire onto the Yuzang Vong fleet. With his supremacy, they marched forward, and so ever so slightly, all the firepower opened up onto the Yuzang Vong fleet. Everything looked to be a success until Thrawn got a communication. The communication came from the core world of Eridu. The planet erupted into civil war. The Emperor had returned. General Pride turned against the Empire, and so did Grand Moff Gideon. His fleet stationed over Eridu turned against the rest of the fleet, who didn't pledge loyalty to the Emperor. Thrawn watched as the communication was cut. Thrawn tried to reach communication with the Senate, and when he got his message through, he was staring into the evil yellow eyes of the Emperor. Thrawn gasped. He never thought Palpatine would return, and before Thrawn could say a word, Palpatine began lifting his finger. It started to choke Thrawn and lift him from the floor in the middle of the command deck on the Chimera. Palpatine told Thrawn that the Senate was dead, the Empire was his, and the new rule of Palpatine had just begun. Before Palpatine cut the transmission, he sent a shock through the mainframe of the Chimera, sending a shock to the ship's reactor core, imploding it from the inside out. While the victory over the Yuzang Vong was remarkable to say the least, the Empire had a bigger threat, and that was the dark side returning. It was General Pride and Moff Gideon joining the Empire of the Emperor. The fleet at Coruscant and the one at Eridu were the largest fleets in the core, and the Empire was already licking its wounds from the battle with the Yuzang Vong outside the Kessel Run. The Chimera ripped apart from the inside out, and the blast doors across the vessel were sealed, creating airlocks for the few survivors of the implosion. Most of the survivors of the Chimera were inside of the bridge. When Thrawn awoke, his vessel was torn to pieces. He was disheartened, but they still had the supremacy. Thrawn looked out the window of his ship before saying goodbye to his dearest Chimera. This would be a fight to end all fights, and because Thrawn knew about Pride taking control of the Eclipse, he couldn't just go to Coruscant unprepared. Thrawn, with the knowledge of the destruction of the Senate, reached out to the Council, as most people in the galaxy referred to the Council of Earth as. Once he returned to the supremacy, Thrawn told the Council that he was in need of resources for this battle. The Council was already disgusted by Palpatine's return, as they informed him that all the resources he needed would be present on Coruscant when he arrived. Thrawn smiled as he rerouted the entire fleet, grounding all fighters inside of their respective vessels as he deployed the fleet to Coruscant. Thrawn pulled together all the top minds inside the Imperial fleet. Admiral Piet was present, as he commanded a superstar dreadnought, which hid behind the supremacy. Thrawn would deploy Piet first, as Piet understood this could be a suicide mission for him and his men. Thrawn would deploy the fleet in 3 different sectors, expecting the Coruscant defense fleet to be stacked. He needed to create a clear path for the Empire to claim victory over these rebels. Thrawn had everything mapped out especially well, considering he was the one who redesigned the Coruscant defense after the Abeloth crisis. After hours of hyperspace travel and the little bit of rest the troops could acquire, the alarms were sounded. Thrawn woke everyone up and made them go to their battle stations. This was a fight for the galaxy, the fight to end the oppressive rule of Palpatine and extinguish his bloodline forever. It was 20 minutes before exiting hyperspace, and Thrawn wanted everyone to be ready. When they eventually exited hyperspace, there was already a battle taking place. When the Supremacy exited hyperspace, one of the core superstar dreadnoughts had been hit with a blast in the Eclipse. The superstar Star Destroyer exploded, shattering, sending debris everywhere. One of the Imperial 3 Star Destroyers was caught in the path of this destruction once it exited hyperspace, and the vessel was too destroyed. Had the ship had the time to maximize its shields, it may have survived the explosion, but it didn't. Thrawn turned and ordered every ship to make their way through the defense lines. The Eclipse was the main target. Thrawn knew this would be a tough battle, but when he arrived he hadn't expected so many to rally to the side of the Emperor. The fleet stationed here was much larger than Thrawn's fleet, and it was larger than the fleet that had just destroyed the Yuzang Vong at Kessel. Palpatine's nails were still deep into the souls of those that served in the Empire. Though the issue is, Thrawn had to reconstruct the strategy. Because the Council and the rest of the Corps decided to respond by sending every vessel at Coruscant, Thrawn had to get everything in order, but before he could, a Resurgent-class Star Destroyer, placed right in front of the Supremacy, was blown out of the sky. The entire vessel exploded, ripping apart and shattering across the exterior of the Supremacy. Thrawn looked across as he could see the Eclipse bearing down on them. One of the deckhands called out to Thrawn and told him that there was a ship emerging from hyperspace. Thrawn requested to know what it was, but the deckhand had no clue. He told Grand Admiral Thrawn that the vessel was larger than anything he'd ever seen before. Thrawn said the words under his breath: the Death Star. He wasn't sure whose side the superweapon was on, but if both the Death Star and the Eclipse turned against the real Empire, then Palpatine would forever remain victorious. Thrawn demanded to get the frequency of the vessel and contact it immediately. The deckhand reported back that the ship was blocking all frequencies. Thrawn began to panic. He contacted Piet and told him to relocate to the left side of the flank, in case the Death Star wasn't on their side. Piet understood and the fleet began moving. Another shot from the Eclipse sounded off as an Imperial 3 Star Destroyer that was moving from right to left was split in half. The Imperial 3 got in the way of Supremacy, another missed shot for the insurgents. The Death Star arrived out of hyperspace and made a very noticeable appearance to the battlefield. Thrawn watched as the superweapon began turning starboard, which really freaked him out because the superweapon laser started turning towards the Supremacy. Thrawn demanded they contact that vessel now, but before he could, a contact came in. It was a Death Star. The voice of the station requested orders of where to fire. Thrawn demanded that they take down the Eclipse. The voice on the other side noted it and began turning the vessel ever so slightly. General Pryde saw this, and he wasn't dumb enough to not see it, and he ordered the crew on deck to forward their engines ever so slightly. The deckhands cried out saying that there was too much power being used on the ship. Pryde whipped out a pistol and shot the deckhand and demanded they do whatever they could to move the vessel forward immediately. Rey stood next to Pryde, watching the general do his job, amused by the death of the single deckhand. The crew was able to get the engines on, but as they did, a green laser opened up and fired across the battlefield, cutting past the lines of combat and moving directly towards the Eclipse. General Pryde saw it and was blinded by the light as a Death Star blast passed by the bridge, narrowly missing by a couple dozen meters, and flying down towards the planet of Coruscant. Rey could feel it, through the Force. The moment Coruscant was hit with the blast, the entire planet erupted from the inside out. Within moments, Palpatine alongside nearly 5 trillion beings died instantly. Rey was furious as she ignited her weapon and cut down Pryde. Moments later, the Eclipse began to rock back and forth. The explosion of Coruscant was completely accidental, being the Death Star was firing at the Eclipse. It was a failure. The explosion of Coruscant caused such a force that debris of chunk of the planet crashed into the defense fleet, rupturing those who served Palpatine. The Eclipse shot one final shot per order of Rey before the entire vessel exploded, and the shot crushed through the center of the Supremacy. On the bridge of the Supremacy, Thrawn was crushed by a pillar, but accepted his fate, ordering everyone to abandon ship before the ship exploded. A captain must go down with his vessel. The Battle of Coruscant would see the downfall of Palpatine and his lineage, and the loyalists who served him, but at what cost? While the Vong may have taken out 3 planets, all 3 planets didn't have the same combined population of Coruscant. The destruction of Coruscant would weigh down on the side of those inside of the Death Star, many of them never able to come to terms with what they had done. Having fired a blast that took the lives of 5 trillion. The Council of Earth would take the burden of this. They were the ones, after all, who deployed the Death Star to Coruscant to aid in the battle. The Council of Earth realized that they became what they swore to destroy by utilizing what defied their moral code. The Death Star went against everything the Council stood for, and they paid for it. The galaxy would collectively remorse the loss of Coruscant, Naboo, Molinist, and Kessel. Trillions of people gone, entire families and bloodlines wiped out. The galaxy would have to move forward as it always did, and the galaxy would. It would take time and healing, but the galaxy would move their capital to the luxurious world of Alderaan and begin picking up the pieces of what was lost. Tyranny had been destroyed, and the bloodline of Palpatine was now forever gone. The galaxy could now take its steps forward without the influence of either the Jedi or the Sith. The galaxy would have a chance to start working away from the military, because war had gone. Generations would remember what happened in such a short period of time. All the way from the Clone Wars to the destruction of Coruscant, they would remember the cost of pain and suffering. And at the end of all of that, what the cost of losing democracy to tyranny would cause them. Healing would begin, and it would continue, being led by planets in the galaxy like Alderaan, Earth, and Tatooine and Eridu. Peace and justice would be established in a totally balanced and unified galaxy. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our series. Again, special thanks to Benjamin Wells, Jonathan, Pimp Daddy Bane, Darth Cheesy, Apollo, Madman Studios, Anakin 003, Lemon Knight, Flynn Van Cease, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. Hit 2,000 likes in this video. I don't know what's coming next, but it is. If you want to see what if, let me know below. I read over comments, but I don't do crossovers. Check out the Twitch community, Discord, Patreon, and podcast if you want to support me in other ways. This is the last day that you can get the Pride of the Earth shirts. If you were watching the full movie, the shirts are no longer available. Pride of the Earth and the Broken One are no longer available on the full movie version. Otherwise, let's talk about our story. Talk about our series. This is the full story. I mean, wow, we finally did it. I'm really excited about this. I really hope you guys enjoyed this story. And I always try and leave a deeper message. That's the true essence of Star Wars. That's the true essence of George Lucas storytelling. Is layering a deeper message in there, and it's certainly inspired by a George Lucas thing, which is like, you know, become the very thing you swore to destroy. And it's basically that we can become what we want to destroy by utilizing what defies us. The greater lesson in the end is that while yes, Earth wins, they win at what cost? And so it's like a little moral play. It's like a play on morality and how we weigh our options. You know, what is worth our morality and some things that we see within our morals. And so, you know, that's kind of the thing we question as human beings. And I think that's something that's interesting that you can put into Star Wars, with Earth being a part of Star Wars, and again, without involving any sort of politics in the story itself. It's always great to include like these deeper themes and thematic devices throughout stories to tell the story. And this story has been so much fun. I've really enjoyed this story. I mean, it's like it's very reminiscent of What If Anakin Was Never Discovered. That was my first like that was like a 2.5 hour long video, and that was like the first movie I kind of ever did. And this is like really like another movie. It's like an installment, and I'm really excited for you guys to see this. And I really hope you enjoyed this, because this has been a really fun series. I mean, really, I've really enjoyed this series a lot. And so it might be season 1, but I do intend to come back with a season 2 at some point. So there's your announcement for season 2. I don't know when it's coming out, but wow, I'm getting emotional over this. It's like so cool. But yeah, I've started working on Sith Empire. There's a mini series coming out for that soon. But yeah, this has been such a fun series. I mean, just looking back at like where the journey literally where the journey began. It's so cool. The journey began like in ancient Egypt, and then we got here, and it's so cool how we've kind of gone from yeah, I don't know. It's really cool. I just hope you all enjoy it. That's all. And I really wanted this final episode to be really special. And I know each corresponding video has like their own ending to it, but this one I wanted to be special. I wanted the ending to feel like the end game for our series, you know, where it's like everything's on the line. Everything is on the line. And I wanted you to feel like, well, maybe the Death Star's going to turn against them. You know, maybe Palpatine's actually going to win. What if Palpatine wins? You know, I've done that before. And I don't think Palpatine would win. I think there's an end for all tyrants, and his end would come right there and then. You know, I think he might be able to sneak his way back in, but it would end in a final battle, and it's Palpatine versus Thrawn. You know, who do you think wins? It's General Pride versus Thrawn. Who do you think wins? And you know, it's almost like the balancing act. The ending of this is like really balancing. It ties off all the loose ends. Using Vong, for example, I know people were like, "Oh, you should have done that in the 5th episode." It's like there's 6 episodes for a reason. But yeah, I don't know. I'm really excited about it. I'm kind of emotional about it, because like this is like the first miniseries we've ever done, like the first like real series we've ever done. So I'm really excited about this. So just remember, when the next series comes out, everything will have been pre-written before it's come out. So like when you see an episode, the next episode's already been written. And the next series is going to be a little bit more fluid than this one. I've definitely learned like releasing order and stuff like that for how I want to do the next series, but this series was so much fun. Starting it back in I think December and finishing in February. I mean, that's awesome. Like we literally did like the Kenobi show, like a six episode show. Like that's so cool. And I really hope you enjoyed this finale. The finale is, you know, Earth gets to establish its power in the galaxy. It's a leading representative in the galaxy, but the galaxy has to move forward. You know, it's always about moving forward. But it's again, you know, it's kind of the same morality that you see in like The Dark Knight, for example. I guess that could be an inspiration. I never really thought about that until like right now. Is like, you know, that you can live long enough to see to become like, or you can die here or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And I didn't really think about that because I haven't watched that movie in ages. But I guess that actually fits for this. So it's like mirroring, as George Lucas always does, like mirroring. So I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all. Spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.